You are now entering a dangerous liberty zone where God-given natural rights are held sacred and exercised. This is your warning. Tyranny, fascism, and censorship will not be tolerated. Ideas will be exchanged freely. Rigorous debate and open discourse is encouraged. If you are weak and your beliefs are fragile, you should leave now. Prepare yourself. We are now live on the Dangerous Liberty Podcast. All right, folks. Happy Thursday out there, everybody. I am excited tonight. Welcome to the show. We're going to take a little break from all the politics, all the Candace craziness, all that good stuff. We're going to refresh our brain a little bit. I want to say hi to everybody over in the chat. I want to say hi to all the mods. Hey, thank you to all the mods. I don't say this enough. I wanted to make sure I did it tonight. Thank you to all the mods that help out with this channel. You guys make this possible. You guys allow me to focus on, talking and running my mouth and not having to pay attention to what's happening over in the chat. So I really, really appreciate you guys, what you do. And you guys are extremely underpaid in that regard. If you haven't done so already, make sure you like, subscribe, and down in the description below, there's a link if you want to become a member and support this channel. You're welcome to do so, and we appreciate you. Make sure you share this as well. Also, down in the link below, or down in the description below, is a link to all of Ashton's social media pages. Make sure you go follow him as well. So I have been a big, fan, follower, interested in the UAP topic for a really long time. And I'm going to go ahead and bring on our guest, and then we'll talk a little bit about that. And then I just want you guys out there, look, I think when you get into some of these things, a lot of what we're going to be talking about is unknown, right? So I think it's easy for us to, or at least we should be honest, to say, hey, some of this stuff is speculative. I really don't know that much about MH370. So I'm going to be relying on Ashton to kind of educate us on the facts involved with that. And I've kind of given him carte blanche. He may not even talk that much about MH370. But as far as some of this stuff goes, it's clearly speculative, but we're going to have fun with it, take it for what it is, and, just receive it with an open mind, have some fun. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring on Ashton. Ashton, thanks for coming on the show, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. If you will, take a minute and just kind of introduce yourself to everybody out there, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, well, I guess I want to start by sending my prayers and having everybody send prayers to Nick Pope, who is a longtime UFOologist who's been studying ufology. He actually was part of the British intelligence that researched this topic and then became a figurehead. And he just came out and said he has stage 4 cancer. So unfortunately, he's probably not going to be with us for a long time. Really nice guy, really humble and really knowledgeable in general. So just want to give him a head nod. Like he would say, I would say I'm not a celebrity. I'm just a public figure. I came out a couple of years ago in this topic of this UFO topic. By the way, we call them UFOs, not UAPs. That's a Hillary Clinton thing. And we got to avoid that as much as possible because they try to rename all these things, including with the science, to keep us dumbed down, to not let us put the dots together. So I just want to throw that out there. But the MH370 videos show some advanced technology being used on the missing airliner that disappeared in 2014. And they reemerge in 2023. And I started promoting them, researching them, investigating the missing plane. And when we watch those videos, we see there are these plasma orbs, looks like UFOs, everything that we've been told about in this UFO community. And so I've been on this adventure for the last 2 years. First, after discovering that the videos are really what happened to the plane after researching it, and then trying to understand what's going on with this UFO topic and what is exactly this technology that we see in these videos and how does it align with real physics, stuff that's peer-reviewed out there, not just people making stuff up. And so that's where I kind of want to take this conversation, which is that my only goal here is to try to enlighten people about the missing airliner and enlighten people about what humans are capable of doing technologically, which is far beyond what the public is currently aware of.
Yeah, I think that's safe to say. Look, we had the SR-71 Blackbird back in the 60s. And that was flying missions for like 30, 40 years before we even knew it existed, at least 30 years thereabouts before we even really knew it existed. And obviously those things have been replaced. So regardless of where you are on all of this, like there is definitely technology that the US government and other governments have for sure. Now the question is whether or not it came from extraterrestrial sources. And I think that gets fun and interesting. And I'll tell you guys a little background on where I became interested in this phenomenon. So I was a little kid, 6 or 7 years old. I remember my mom, who's extremely religious. Um, Something came up. We were at like a party at our house, and we're a religious party, so we're like eating food and playing board games. And so, but someone brought up UFOs. She's like, "Look, I saw one." She's always, I've gotten her to relay this story a couple of other times. She's always been embarrassed about it. She doesn't like when people bring it up. But long story short, I remember her talking about the fact that there was across the street from her, she saw a large disc-like object with lots of lights all the way around it. What we know today is a classic UFO flying saucer. That's what she described. And as a little kid, I just became infatuated with the subject. I found every book I possibly could. I'm like, suddenly, this is something that I thought was just science fiction, and this could possibly be real. And I think if you dig into this, I know not everybody has time to get into this. They're doing other things, working, living their lives. It's just not their thing. But there is too much circumstantial evidence. And just as of late, now we have much harder evidence that basically substantiates there's something going on. Now, whether or not this is extraterrestrial, I don't know. I tend to think that it is. And, for those of us that are religious, I don't see anything out there that undermines anything that from a religious standpoint with the UFO phenomenon and possibly extraterrestrials. I know many people will agree, and that's something that's debated amongst people that are religious all the time. But with that being said, I do think there's some really good evidence that clearly these UFOs do exist, and there is technology, both UFO and USOs. Like there's been a lot of, and USO is unidentified submerged object. We see a lot of objects, and these are other things that have been documented by the military, where you have objects very large going at speeds under the water of like 500 knots. And we've also seen footage of where we have these transmedium objects going from air directly into the water without even so much as a ripple. So it's a fun topic to explore, and I think it's good stuff. Now, with the MH370, two things I want to ask you right off the bat.
Sure.
Give everybody just a little bit more background on the MH370. And I'm also curious, because just a couple of years ago, and I haven't been following the MH370 event very closely, I'll be honest with you, but I do remember suddenly those videos emerged with the orbs around the plane.
Yep.
Where did that video allegedly originate from?
Yeah, all good questions. And so let me, I want to respond to a couple things that you said there. First of all, is that I've never seen a UFO before. I only got interested in this. I mean, like, I guess I was kind of peripherally interested in UFOs, and like you, like there's something going on. I mean, especially after they released those videos in 2017 and 2018, but I've never seen one myself. And I don't have any bias in terms of aliens being real or not real. I would say that they made the topic socially unacceptable, and you spoke to that with your story about your mom, where it's like people saw them but they made you seem like you were crazy, and we need to do away with that. Like you said, I think it's people should feel comfortable believing whatever they want. You want to believe that the aliens are here, you want to believe they're not here. Either way, you know what, we shouldn't judge people for that. And I don't think it does. I don't think it is incompatible with faith. God can make aliens too. It's a big universe out there.
Yeah.
Also, you mentioned the transmedium capability. This is one of the first clues, and I believe it's one of the 5 observables they talk about in UFOs. This capability to go between different mediums without being impeded, which from a classical physics perspective seems completely abnormal to us. We don't have planes that go and fly into the water and then come fly out of the water again. Right. But with gravitational manipulation, with this electromagnetic manipulation that a UFO uses, then that does become possible. So with respect to the MH370 situation in videos, the origin story of those videos is that they kind of reemerged on Reddit, on the UFO subreddit on August, I believe it was 7th of 2023. They had been reposted before, but they never really got any traction. They just got like downvoted to 0, and people would just ignore them, say this looks cheap. And I think that was because people had no idea what they were looking at. is that only now we know, and I'll pull the videos up in a second, that one video is wide area motion imagery, something that the public was not even aware what it meant or what it existed, even though the information was out there, just no one really looked. And the other video is a Lightning G4 by Northrop Grumman, which is a color FLIR video. And the only videos that we have, even now today, I was checking earlier today, there are no publicly released whammy footage anywhere, even though we know there's been multiple systems. And the only FLIR videos that have been released, there's 0 like mounted pods that are on the wings. There's 0 videos of any mounted wing pods, and there's 0 that are not black and white. Every single video that's out there is in the black and white FLIR. So they're very careful about this footage that gets out, which means that if this footage is real, it has to be leaked military footage. The other thing about the videos is we can very clearly see in the color FLIR that we're looking at a Boeing 777. Like very, very clearly, it's a Boeing 777. It's not like those UFO videos where you're looking at a fuzzy dot. You're looking at a Boeing 777. You can see it in the rainbow palette. You can even see the air conditioning manifolds. There's 6 of them throughout the Boeing 777. You can even see them through the skin of the plane because of the heat difference. And in the Gorgon stair whammy, it has coordinates in the bottom left, including the relay satellite NROL-22 that the drone is relaying with. So we know exactly where that's happening. So that's the origin story of these videos emerge on Reddit. They get talked about for 2 weeks. And then suddenly this debunk appears out of nowhere from a 1-day-old Reddit account. Somebody saying, oh, I found this graphic from a 90s video game. And if you like modify it a little bit, like one of the frames matches up. And that means that this is all fake. And everybody goes, yep, this is fake now. And the Reddit mods literally banned discussion of it. They said, we're done with this. Nobody's allowed to talk about this anymore. And they moved the last stragglers, including myself, to a different subreddit that's controlled by people that want their debunkers that say that it's all fake. And you're like, this is pretty suspicious, of course. And I didn't let it go. And what I found out about 2 months after that was for something like this to be leaked footage, which again, I'll show you guys. I know we're getting suspenseful here. I'll pull it up in a minute. This had to be leaked by somebody. Like somebody went to prison for this. You don't leak videos that nobody's ever seen before of military footage outside of the standard protocol and not have them catch you. Especially because the whammy footage, it is CGI. They are taking photos and building this Google Earth video playback. So that means somebody was logged into a computer system with software that is tracking their movements and their clicks in a secure database, and they somehow got that out of there. So I started digging around in October of 2023 after all of Reddit decided this is all banned. And it actually only took me 2 weeks to find the guy that leaked the videos. Because you just think in your head, like, this had to be they had to be taking this really seriously. We're looking at videos of an civilian airliner getting zapped out of the sky. And I find this guy, Edward C. Lynn, super suspicious case. There's even the headlines are like the weird case of Edward Lynn. He's a Navy VPU-2 special operator in this special program where people tell me that they don't wear their badges when they do operations overseas. And I spoke to somebody that worked with him in the same time period in the VPU-2. And they said that they obviously can't tell me about like what they do, but he said he would have had access to that level of surveillance capability. And it was crazy because whatever it is that they still to this day won't say what this guy leaked, it triggered an alarm all the way up to the Joint Chiefs of Staff for how dangerous it was from a national security perspective. But they tried to downplay it like they were going after him because he was sleeping with prostitutes and telling prostitutes about national security and weapons. So long story short, and then like I promised, I will play the videos. I reached out to his lawyer, reached out to him. I even called him live on a stream one time. Never, ever would he return a phone call or pick up the phone, return a voicemail. And his lawyer changed his phone number. Lawyer wouldn't even answer, which is like, hey, man, I'm saying you leaked these videos. I want to get an on the record statement. You feel like that. If you didn't do it, should be pretty straightforward, right? So, right. Yeah, I'm very confident in my assessment. But like you said before, obviously some of this is speculative. But the level of research, I would say if what I'm about to show you right now was anything less spectacular than what we see, everybody would agree these videos are obviously real. And obviously what happened. If it just showed a plane crashing into the ocean, people would be like, oh, that's obviously what happened. We just happened to be recording it right before it occurred. Right. So
right.
Let me pull this up and you can comment if you want. Here we go. So I'll pull up, there's a couple different versions that I think are good. I'm going to first just pull up the whammy, which is this is a drone above. So these are both actually MQ9 Reapers. So if you want to pull up the screen share thing that I did here. Both these are MQ9 Reapers. This is a MQ9 Reaper from above. They generally have one pod underneath each wing looking down, and they circle over an area that's 100 square kilometers. And so you can see in the bottom left, you can see the coordinates. You can see it says NROL 22. The coordinates change because the person's moving the screen around. So what happened here is they click somewhere on a map and then it like zooms in, it pulls up a window. And we're looking at that window that somebody pulled up in this Gorgon stare wide area motion imagery. And right off the bat, you can see we're looking at some craziness going on here. Like we got 3 things spinning around this plane. And from this alone, we would never be able to tell exactly what these little orbs or whatever you want to call them are. We would just say they're UFOs. And we notice though they change and they go vertical right here. So there's clearly some purpose to whatever we see happening. And then this is the magic. In just an instant, it's gone. This footage we're looking at here is only 6 frames per second. So that's happening within less than 1 second. Now, what you saw happen right there, I'm going to go back just 1 sec. The person moves the screen over to the right. This is still, real time is moving here. Now, this is a pre-recorded video. Like they can pull this up like DVR. And then this person is doing a screen recording of a window. But notice that mouse cursor goes over to the top right. And what it's doing is it's closing the window. And that's why it goes black.
Where is this camera exactly?
This is on a drone, an MQ9 Reaper drone above, circling above. And this plane is only at somewhere around 5,000 feet, could even be lower because these clouds are cumulus clouds you see in the background. So this plane is super low. That's the ocean underneath that you're looking at. And we have the coordinates. That's the coordinates is the Nicobar Islands. So actually, if you just draw a straight line from the last radar plot of this plane in the Andaman Sea and the Nicobar Islands, it goes straight to where this coordinates is in the bottom left, which is why I tell people it's just absolutely insane that people don't realize either this is what really happened to the plane. It's the best evidence by far of what happened. And that's just one video. That's just one video. So let me pull up the second one because, like I said, we would have really no context for what's going on here if we didn't have a second one. Now, this one actually compares the two. If you want to pull this one up. On the right of this video, you're going to see the Gorgon stare compared because this will let you see, if you want to pull up the one I just shared.
Yep.
There you go. It'll let you see how perfectly synchronized these are. This is a second MQ9 Reaper drone. It's got a Lightning G4 pod under hard point number or station number 5 underneath the wing. And it's filming in color FLIR. Now, it's really interesting that it's filming in color FLIR because this indicates they know exactly what's going to happen. Otherwise, you would film this in like optical or just black and white. But they know what they're about to do to this plane. And from this, we can tell we're looking at plasma orbs. We can tell we're looking at plasma orbs or at least a plasma field because of the color of these orbs now is pretty much the same as the background. And when it really zooms in here, if I were to slow this down or even just pause it, I mean, you can clearly see this orb. Not only does this orb have a field around it, but you can actually see the heat signature inside of it super clearly. And the heat signature is not uniform. Part of it's like green and then part of it's blue. So what I've learned this is a little fusion reactor pretty much. So you can see this orb has part green part in it. So that's a different temperature than the rest. And you can almost draw a circle, like a sphere around this orb if you were to imagine it. And that would be our magnetic field. So what this indicates is that this is a little fusion reactor drone. And the real proof of this, I have one more video I want to share. So there we can see the plane disappear. For people that are wondering, that is actually a wormhole. That's actually a wormhole. I would have never believed that wormholes were real, that we could actually do them until I saw this. But it's not annihilation. It's an actual wormhole. Let me share one last video for you. and then we can talk about these or the whole any of it, which is this is a color. This version of that same drone video has been color changed, and you'll be able to tell why it's been color changed in just a second. Look at those dark lines coming out of these orbs in front of it and behind it. And you can see it's kind of hazy, like it's not really perfectly uniform black line. It looks, what's happening here is you're seeing radiation from a fusion reactor or just from straight up manipulating space-time. What happens is that the electrons end up moving faster than the light. And this causes something called Cherenkov radiation. And Cherenkov radiation is in ultraviolet, which means that it's outside of the thermal spectrum. So because it's outside of the spectrum the camera picks up, it shows up as black. It shows up as black in the thermal, in the drone video here. And it's only visible on this video from close range as well. So this actually gives insight into the propulsion mechanism that the drones are using. They're using the actual fusion reaction as a propulsion mechanism. And that's why we see these weird lines coming from in front of them. The faster the electrons are moving, the faster the electrons are moving than light itself in the medium, the longer the line is. Because you can imagine these electrons are like speeding out faster than the light as the light's trying to keep up. So the electrons emit their own ultraviolet light. And that's what you're seeing with those lines there. And then one last detail I want to point out, which I think is vitally important, because this is going to connect to my theory for UFOs. The last part. Watch very carefully what happens right at the end. The orbs converge on the plane. They converge on the plane, and you even see gravitational lensing in the last frame right here. You can see the orbs flatten out, and you can even see the plane looks like it's slightly stretched from the previous frame it was in. See that?
Mm-hmm.
This is going to indicate that they're really actually producing a gravitational wave that is essentially equivalent. Like if you were to see this, it would almost look like you were dropping a rock in the water, but the water in this case is space-time itself. And it would look like it just disappears through a mirror that's not even there. So
Ashton, what were you saying? What is the black part of the orbs?
So the lines that are coming out of them, if you want to switch back to our thing, the lines that are coming out of this Cherenkov radiation, which is going to be this radiation that forms in a fusion reactor. And what they've done is that you can imagine there's like a tube inside of there. And what they're doing is they're forcing the air through it to create a plasma, has the fusion reaction happen in the middle, and then you're going to have the radiation is trying to leak out of any end. So wherever the magnetic field is, like imagine the Earth. In the Earth, we've got a magnetic field that goes from the north all the way down to the south. Now you take that Earth, tip it on its side. The weak points are the north and south pole. That's exactly the same as this little fusion reactor. It's like taking the Earth and tipping it on its side. Now you've got these magnetic fields that are containing this plasma, and the part where it leaks out is along the axis on either end. And they use something called a magnetic mirror, which is one of these Department of Energy, laboratory experiments that they do to basically confine the electrons and the particles within this region in the center to force everything to attract to it and cause the fusion reactions to happen. But the main point is everybody talks about, you were even talking about the transmedium, the propulsion mechanisms of these UFOs. Those videos show it as clearly, as more clear than any of the other UFO videos out there. It's not the reason why we don't see like heat coming out of these UFOs when they're flying around, because they're not using conventional heat-based propulsion mechanisms. They're using like what we see there is a fusion reaction, which is leading to ultraviolet radiation as the propulsion. Or they might be using something that's even more exotic, but based on electromagnetism, something that's not going to necessarily have a heat signature. And they've figured out thermodynamics to a degree where they can essentially reverse the cold going to hot instead of hot flowing to cold through relativity. The idea that if I have something going one direction really fast and something going the other direction really fast, and I'm looking at the other thing, it's going to look colder than it really is. You can abuse this mechanism in electrons at the tiny scale, and you can actually mess around with the laws of thermodynamics. This is what I think they've figured out. So sorry, I was kind of ranting.
what do you propose happened to the plane? Are we saying that it was just transported somewhere else? And if so, where else? And where are the people? Because there's what, 230 or so people on that plane?
So let's put ourselves in the mindset of those videos and just kind of take everything else, throw it to the side, right? We're just looking at some videos that are clearly military surveillance. It's not commercial for sure. And we can even see from that drone video, it's somebody's manually moving that camera around. It's not auto tracking either. So there's human beings involved in that. Why are they filming that plane? Why is there really a drone? Is there a drone above every plane flying around in America when it's flying over the ocean or what have you, and another drone next to it? No. And I know your background is in the military. There's only one reason why there's two drones around that plane. That's got to be an operation. That's got to be a special covert operation. One of the things that before this, I would never have thought we could do something like that. But now, since then, I've learned from like the Mossad pager bombing, from the Venezuelan Maduro operation, that we are capable of a lot more than what I think people realize.
Sure.
So then the question is, okay, if that's an operation, what's going on? Who's involved in this? And I'm just going to skip right to the answer. This is United States versus China. Why? Well, it's happening in the South China Sea, which, by the way, was heavily contested at the time in 2014 when this plane disappeared. That's where the plane initially goes dark. The plane is loaded up with Freescale Semiconductor engineers, defense contractor for the United States. They're the actual engineers, not like the middlemen, middle managers, or what have you. 20 of them. That's way too many people. Every company has policies around how many people of the same company can be on the plane, especially when they're engineers and things like that. And they're flying to Beijing. 8 of them are Chinese nationals. So if you want to have leverage over them, if you're China, you definitely have plenty of leverage. You can just make them and their families disappear if you want. So that has to be what the motive is, the big level motive of this. Now, in the videos there, if you were looking closely, we also saw there was smoke coming out of the plane in both videos, very, very clearly. I spoke to an expert. I can't say who, they asked me not to say, but one of the big experts that's out there that's been talking about MH370 for like 10 years. And it was funny because they came back to the same conclusion that I did, and I don't think they ever saw my work, which is that smoke is coming out from the AC exhaust ports underneath the belly of the plane. It's billowing out from the bottom, and then it's wrapping around the side of the hull. And this means there's an onboard fire somewhere in that plane, most likely in the cargo bay. In the cargo bay, and the smoke is recirculating, and the system is overheating, and they're trying to flush the smoke out of the system, out of the plane. So this speaks to me, at least, and I would love to hear your impression, that the fire is not accidental. The reason why we're recording that with these covert with these drones is because it's an operation. That would indicate that we planted a fire, a deliberate fire that's not going to cause the plane to explode or burn up in time, to divert the plane away from China, away from the South China Sea. And then we deployed, or we had our drones ready to go to intercept the plane in the Nicobar Islands. We knew exactly what we were about to do to the plane with these orbs that we either deployed from submarines or from a B-52 or something like that. We deployed these orbs. We have their AI spin around the plane. And then we use some, secret technology, I would call wormhole technology secret, that most likely is derived from the Manhattan Project. Everything about what you saw from those orbs spinning around the plane is basically thermonuclear weapon principles. I didn't know any of this before a couple of years ago, but one of the first things I did was start reading scientific papers, and I found out about a guy named Freidwart Winterberg. He's written some of these classified papers called the DIRDs, Defense Intelligence Reference Documents, that the UFO people talk about. I actually read all the UFO people's scientific papers. And it turns out this guy, Freidwart Winterberg, is a Project Paperclip scientist. The Nazis and took their scientists from them or whatever. He's really one of them. And he did a whole bunch of research on inertial confinement fusion. And his thermonuclear weapons textbook, there's not very many out there that teach how thermonuclear weapons work, straight up says that one of the principles of making advanced thermonuclear weapons is a non-fission plasma-based trigger, meaning that you would have Instead of using a bomb to detonate your fusion explosion for your thermonuclear weapon, you use an electric trigger. The plasma is an electric trigger. And you would use something called the polyhedral configuration, a triangle configuration, he says, so that you can collapse on it on all sides onto your fusion payload. And so here's my question to you to wrap this up, because my opinion of UFOs, based on what I just said, is that they're nukes, is that what we see is those drones spinning around the plane, those are triggering a fusion bomb. And we don't even know what a fusion bomb does. We've never seen it before. We developed them in the 60s, like with the SR-71, but we immediately banned all testing right after that. And to this day, nobody's ever seen one or knows what it does. What if a fusion bomb creates a wormhole? What if it manipulates space-time? And what if we figured out how to control it so that we can figure out where the object shows up on the other side? To me, that explains the whole UFO thing. And it even explains how the aliens can get here too, because the aliens aren't using SpaceX rockets. They're using wormholes to fly around.
That's a lot to digest. So where do you think that the plane went? Are we talking a different dimension? Are we talking about a different location?
Yeah.
Alpha Centauri? Like, where do you think the plane went? And I know this is completely
This is probably the most important part, because a lot of people try to make the topic silly. And when they don't want to talk about this, they'll say, oh, Ashton thinks aliens zapped the plane. Ashton thinks the plane went to the bizarro dimension. In fact, I sent a super chat to Nick Fuentes. I'm not like a fan of his, but I like to know what people think about this topic, especially, you know, influencers that are out there. And he came back with yeah, it's silly. I'll never believe it no matter what, right? And at least lets me know where we're at. You know, we're pretty far from understanding this to be real. But where did this plane end up going? This is the thing. There is no bizarro dimension. There's not a dimension out there where there's Ashton with a twirly mustache. The aliens aren't coming from, you know, dimension X or whatever. A wormhole is just a shortcut between 2 points in our reality. Sure. If I were to represent it to you guys, I would say it's like this. See that? This is us on this flat reality. We can't see this area up here because we're stuck on this two-dimensional flat reality. If you add an extra dimension, though, then you could do this. You could connect 2 points. And now you could pick somebody up here and move them over here. And for anybody who's on this two-dimensional surface, it would look like they just disappeared. It would look like they just reappeared over here. That's what a wormhole is. That's what teleportation is. So all a wormhole is saying is that there is an extra dimension that we don't perceive, a shortcut. It would mean that all points are actually connected. All points in space and time are connected through an extra dimension. We just don't have the ability to perceive it. So to answer your question, that means the plane could theoretically be anywhere in the entire universe. However, I'm a guy that follows the evidence. People think I'm a conspiracy theorist, but I'm actually just a skeptic that has been swayed by one very powerful case. We found debris. We found debris from the plane. There's serial numbers on it.
Right.
To me, that's compelling evidence. I can't just throw that out. But where did we find it? We found it in Africa. They're searching off the coast of Australia. That's thousands of kilometers away. That's like saying, oh, well, plane crashed off the coast of New York, but we're finding debris in California.
Right.
You're like, wait, what? You know how far away that is? Like, well, how did it get there? Oh, well, it just, it floated. It got on a train.
Well,
and made it over.
They did find that debris, like 6 or 7 years after MH370?
No, it was about 1 to 2 years later. But still, the point being, it was probably on the beach for a while. It didn't just get there and they found it immediately. Like no one was even looking there because everyone's looking off the coast of Australia because they think this plane went into the South Indian Ocean. But the videos tell us what really happened. The plane never turned south into the South Indian Ocean. We're watching it in the Nicobar Islands. This is the location where the narrative that's been told to the public, or at least been sold to us, is the plane took a sharp south turn and flew for like 5.5 hours and then just ran out of fuel and crashed into the South Indian Ocean. And we've been searching there for 12 years, including they just finished the search like a week ago. Nothing. They've never found anything down there, but they're sure it's down there somewhere. Well, here's a simpler answer. It disappears in the Nicobar Islands, 5 hours north of there. and it's going west. How do I know that? Well, if we slow down the MH370 video, you can actually see the reflection of the plane, the tail of the plane, in that first frame when this plane starts to disappear. And it's pulled a little bit back from the frame beforehand. Also, when you start learning about electromagnetics, you learn about something called the right hand rule. And what this means is, long story short, the direction the orbs are spinning around the plane is going to determine the vector of force. So the reason why they're spinning around the plane vertically like that is because there's a specific purpose. If you could just teleport something anywhere with no restriction, those orbs could be spinning on any axis around the plane. And then it just converges and then the plane just appears wherever you want. The reason why they're not, the reason why they're spinning exactly vertical to the direction of the plane is because they're going to send that plane backwards. And when the plane comes out, it's still going to be flying the same speed. And they don't want to rip it to shreds. They're intentionally trying to move that plane from one location to the next. And what that means too then is that, how does this work? It's got to be like equivalent to a hypergate system in sci-fi, where you have to have something set up on either side. You say, here's where it's disappearing. We got these orbs, and you got to have it connected somehow to something else. Quantum entanglement, whatever you want to call it, that connects this, threads the needle between our space-time. And this also means that it's not going to be like a portal where it's not like Stargate where you open up the portal and it's just open and now it's a bridge between the two sides. It's a one-way hop. You hop on that side, now you're on the other side. If you want to do it again, you got to do another one-way hop. It's not going to stay, that portal's not staying open. So does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, so you think that plane arrived intact somewhere else near Africa? That's what you're saying.
I think it came out the other side intact, but it could have come out. Also, it could have come out in pieces because we found parts of the pieces in the plane. This is the part where obviously it's very speculative. I think it came out somewhere near the Maldives, and then there were some islanders that have a very credible sighting that say they saw the plane, and there were like 15 different people. And people have tried to dismiss this sighting, but when I'm looking at it, I'm going, this actually fits with our story. Especially if you can start really cheating with this teleportation and make the plane come out like slightly delayed in the future. But we don't need to dig into all that. But point being, plane shows up in Maldives. People see it in the sky, and they see it flying towards Diego Garcia military base south. So what happens? Maybe the plane crashes. They ditch it in the water somewhere near there. And that's why a couple pieces float up and they find it in Africa. Or plane lands in Diego Garcia. They take it apart somewhere there, and then a few pieces, they throw a few pieces in the water, or a few pieces fall off of it. The plane was on fire, so a few pieces could fall off of this, or they're also teleporting it. So it's hard to say exactly what occurred, but I don't think anybody was alive. I think that the fire probably incapacitated everyone on the plane well before they even got to the point where this plane's getting zapped out of the sky. And I think the overall reason why they did this is some weird CIA intelligence espionage thing with China, that they're in some kind of like secret covert war over this technology that may be from aliens or what have you. And basically whoever got there first wins. And I think we got there first and we won. And this is the outcome. Now we just basically use orbs to exert our will over our adversaries.
And that's one of the conspiracies, right? That there were people on board, there was technology on board, there was going to be a transfer of information from people there on that plane to somebody in China. And that's allegedly why they decided to take that out. I just don't understand why they wouldn't choose a more conventional means to take out the plane that would give them more plausible deniability.
Well, so let's explore that for a second, because that's obviously the number one thing. In fact, there's this guy, Joseph Farrell, and it's wild. Like 3 days after plane disappeared, he does this interview and he nails everything. He's like, he even mentions the U.S. using a super weapon to teleport the plane. And I'm listening to this 10 years later going, holy crap. But I talked to him. It turns out he just guessed that. But he also says the reason why he didn't go all in on his theory was he's like, why teleport a plane though? Just hit it with a missile if you need to do that. Well, I think the answer is pretty obvious, because the point isn't to destroy the plane. Those people are working for us. They're working for one of our defense contractors. Like maybe we were trying to keep them, retain them. Maybe they're slaving away at Diego Garcia right now. In fact, there was some Facebook photos in 2020. This was even before I started researching, but we dug up every piece of evidence that's out there. I mean, I would throw my knowledge of the plane up there with basically anybody at this point. But anyway, people found photos of people on Diego Garcia that look just like a lot of the crew members who were on the plane. And I'm not, I don't put a lot of stock in that. That's why you don't see me post about it that much.
Sure.
But you think about what would you do if there were people that were alive? And there's only a few options. Either you're living the rest of your life on Diego Garcia and nobody's ever allowed to see you again, or you're in witness protection probably, or you're dead. Those are the only things I can imagine that you would do. And I don't see anybody coming out being like, I'm the survivor of MH370. So, I don't want to give people false hope. But if people want to know where would I search for the plane, I would be searching in the waters near Diego Garcia, because you're like not allowed to go anywhere near there. If I would not want to land a Boeing 777 on a military base where a bunch of people are going to see it. I'd probably just want to ditch it in the water somewhere where nobody's allowed to go and search it, and make sure it goes under and the plane doesn't come apart, so that no pieces or bodies come floating up, because people are going to start to wonder if bodies start coming up, what's going on.
So your theory is like, they didn't want to just destroy the people in the plane. They wanted to intercept it and either actually intercept the people and or the technology that was being carried on that plane.
Yeah, and it might even be more sick than that, honestly. Like, this is the part where I was a public guy that is like just a normie, right? I was planning to live my life as a middle manager and what have you. And now I'm realizing that the CIA is willing to do these crazy operations. It's hard to even put my headspace in what they're thinking, but this might just have all have been a show. Like, to your question of why not just use a missile, because they wanted China to know. They wanted China to know that we're better than them and we got technology that's better than them. They just don't want them to know exactly what it is. Like, it's a fine line between we wanted China to know that we got something that can teleport a plane versus we wanted China to see those videos, right? Because those videos don't just tell you that we can teleport a plane. They show you exactly how we're teleporting the plane. Like, if I can figure out how the science and stuff works in those videos, China's best scientists and what have you, they probably cracked it years ago. In fact, I even go so far as to argue the reason why you're seeing the push right now for AI and fusion is because China knows aneutronic fusion is the way, because they know those videos are real. And they're thinking in their head, oh, we can push past America by publicly investing everything into fusion and these things that we know work, while America is still covering it up and hiding it from their public so that they don't get to know about it. And that's why you're seeing Trump Media Group acquire Tri-Alpha Energy, the oldest fusion company. That happened like a month ago. This is why you're seeing this happen, is that now Trump and his administration, who's in the know, and they're aware of this technology, they're going, oh, crap, we can't let China get to this first. Now we've got to start letting some of it out. Because I'll remind you, those videos now are 12 years old. 12 years ago. So if we had wormhole technology, we had it over 12 years ago. And Nick Fuentes was saying in his response on my super chat to him, he said, why not test it with an apple first? Why not throw an apple in your wormhole? And this is like kind of shows the naivete of some of these people, which is, you really think that's the first time we used those orbs on that? It's like, yes, we were testing it out on the Boeing 777 in our covert operation. It's like, nah, man, I promise you, we used it on an Apple probably in the 1970s, right? The fact that we're using it on a Boeing 777 in 2014 means that this ain't our first rodeo.
So this wasn't a test. This was an operation.
Exactly. And so if I would, I'll throw the ball back into your court on this, because how does this then connect to the UFO phenomenon? Well, here you go. This is where now I become super suspicious of all these UFO people, because I'm just handing them all the answers on a silver platter. Now, not the answers about aliens. I truly, even to this point, I don't know where this technology comes from, is the truth for you. But everything else, I say, oh, look, we're looking at Air Force MQ-9 Reaper drones, right? Those are, and they're also made by General Atomics. I'm looking at a Northrop Grumman Lightning G4. That's our defense contractor. I'm looking at Gorgon Stare wide area motion imagery from another MQ-9, and that's made by Sierra Nevada Corporation, another defense contractor. Now, this is a little bit more speculative, but we're looking at plasma orbs that are fusion reactors. There's only one company that already has a fusion reactor built. It's Lockheed Martin. and it went dark in like 2017, 2018, something like that. So I'm going to say I'm fairly confident that's Lockheed Martin affiliated orbs. But point being, oh, and then the last part, who has the charter for fusion? The Department of Energy. So who have I just implicated? The Air Force, the Department of Energy, the defense contractors, and the CIA running the operation because it's an operation being done against, a Malaysian airline or what have you. Well, those are the exact same four groups that make up the program, the UFO reverse engineering program that these people are talking about all the time. Those are the exact groups they say do it. So my question to you, I guess, is what do you think about that idea? Because to me, this implies that at a bare minimum, they're using the alien topic to distract from this shadow war, technological war, whatever you want to call it, over like supremacy over this technology. And at worst, they just made up the whole alien thing to cover it up entirely.
Well, I mean, what we see there is very different than I think we've seen, not only that have been reported visually and in some videos, some pictures. I mean, you're talking about plasma versus actual physical aircraft. So I do think there's a divergence of technology there that makes sense to me. So I don't know if those two things are necessarily the same. They're probably related. I mean, that's really the only thing that I can conclude. I mean, there is clear evidence of actual physical crafts, I believe.
Well, so here's the thing I want to point out is that, and this is a misconception I think people have. A lot of people think that plasma is just like a hologram or an illusion, or that when we make these plasma balls that we're using this as like a decoy and countermeasures, which you can use it for that, absolutely. Sure. But these are physical crafts that we're looking at. And what they've done is they've incorporated this fusion reaction into their hypersonics. In fact, you could argue what you're looking at there is a hypersonic drone. All they've done is take out the turbojet engine and they've turned it into a scramjet, which basically means you take out the propellers on the inside and now it's just a tube. And now it becomes an air breathing device that turns the air into plasma. They just shoot a laser in front of it. It turns the air into plasma.
Do you think those are actual physical drones, not just balls of plasma?
Yeah, there's a physical object in there, I'm sure. I'm sure. Some people are trying to argue that it's just like a manifestation of plasma in a geometry form, but there's intelligent control happening there. So there's at least a computer inside of that. So there is an object inside for sure, in my opinion. And I think that they just incorporated fusion that they solved, maybe even back in the 70s, into our hypersonic craft. And I think we're even going to start seeing, this will be probably one of the first things we start seeing. We're going to see fusion propulsion. This is what the UFOs are using. They're using, what's the energy source of your flying saucer that's hovering around, defying physics? If you do the math on the energy that would be required for that, it becomes astronomical very, very quickly. Like even you probably know, like our fighter jets and stuff, their airtime or whatever you call it is like 45 minutes, hour.
Yeah, not very long.
Right. So when we look at these UFOs, they're even just hovering around would take this huge amount of energy. So the answer for the UFO people, number one, what's the energy source? It's fusion. That's the big secret. This is the reason why the Department of Energy and the Air Force is coming up. Here's another angle on the crash retrieval thing. What if all this crash retrieval talk where they're saying, oh, well, this UFO crash, we have to go pick it up in Brazil before they get it. What if this is like Broken Arrow situation where we've lost our nuclear weapon, right? And we can't let anybody else get it. Like one of these orbs malfunctions and crashes down, and we got to have a retrieval team to go pick it up so that some, adversary doesn't get our secret technology. Couldn't that be another angle to the, the whole reverse engineering crash retrieval thing?
Yeah, I think there's lots of different ways from a propaganda standpoint that you can use the UFO phenomena and or back and forth for convenience to either hide, confuse, or obfuscate different operations. When you start getting into what's your thoughts on encounters of the third kind, where we're talking about things like the Virginia incident, where people have not only seen these actual crafts, but now they're seeing actual beings. Do you buy into that? Do you think those have any validity? Because that definitely adds a whole nother level of, I don't know, complication if we're just saying, hey, this is just U.S. advanced physics technology compared to, something that is extraterrestrial?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, my view on aliens is pretty nuanced. One side, I say I don't care at all. Like aliens, unless they're impacting my daily life, that makes no difference to me, right? Like, what does it matter? And when they announce aliens, which I think Trump is going to end up doing here, probably in the next couple of years, I think he wants to get credit for that. He's going to say, yeah, there's alien life out there. He's going to say, we've detected it. We can't talk about it, but we've detected it. And I think people are just going to move on right away. Like, it's just not a big deal. It doesn't really matter. But the other side of it is, I think that every kind of alien can exist. I have no problem with people saying that these aliens that are out there, it's just that that's not the important factor. The important factor is the technology that would change our life. How would that alien actually get here unless they're already in the ocean or something like that, which are certainly explanations. So for me, I don't care where the technology came from. Makes no difference whatsoever. Could come from the thick whites or the crab people underneath the oceans or what have you. And that was probably one of the most radicalizing parts for me, is learning that this technology, wormhole technology, which I thought was just science fiction before all of this, is actually real. That revelation to me is so mind-blowing that it just dwarfs the idea that, the little ET is going to come over here, right? Like, okay, bro, I don't care. Just give me the warp drives, give me the wormholes, let me get out of here, because it tells me the universe is a lot bigger place than what we're being sold, Like Neil deGrasse Tyson, I think I was just watching a clip where he's going, we're never going to get to another planet. The aliens could never get here. Everything's too far away. Like, they're so condescending about it. And it turns out there's just like a loophole that makes it completely realistic and possible. You're like, okay, yeah, this is a lie. This whole world's a lie.
That's the same science guy that believes that anybody can be, there's a spectrum of genders and boys should be able to play in girls' sports and vice versa. So,
and can I rant on that for a second too? Because
feel free.
I call the disclosure movements out there woke disclosure, and even the physicists, I do dislike them. I have a feud against all of them right now, because what I've learned on this too is that there's weirdly a political aspect to this that I never ever expected. I've got people out here that, like you said, think there's like 37 genders, or they got to get 27 COVID shots or they're going to die or what have you. And those people at the same time, like, think the aliens are visiting us, but they'll go, no, it's crazy that you think a wormhole is possible. I'm going, okay, man. Like, but wormholes are like actual mathematical solutions to Einstein. We just haven't seen them. That's the only thing, so it's tough out there.
At least one falls under some category of science and is theoretically possible.
Yeah, I mean, there's as far as I can tell, science says there's only two genders. Science also says wormholes are theoretically at least possible, but they act like it's all science fiction. And I think, though, this speaks to a broader possible, like, brainwashing that maybe has been going on for a long time to get us to ridicule these topics, to not take them seriously, to not discuss them. Because I think once we start to discuss it, it becomes a lot more obvious that there really is something here. And even normal, everyday Americans like us can figure it out and understand it. Meanwhile, they want us to think that we got to go to Neil deGrasse Tyson to get our opinion about what's possible in physics. And Neil deGrasse Tyson is not the guy building these orbs. He's not the guy writing the papers that are allowing that stuff to happen. It's other engineers and scientists that are working for Lockheed Martin, working for Boeing, working for Northrop, working for Raytheon, these defense contracts that are doing that stuff.
No, for sure. The what do you think about Bob Lazar's story? That's always, I remember watching that when it first aired as a kid in like 88 or 89, somewhere around there. I don't remember exactly, somewhere in that time period. Maybe it was 90.
Isn't it cool or interesting how he got way more credibility like 25 years later? He came out like late 80s.
Many of the things that he said that, just like we're talking about, everybody was saying, that's crazy. That doesn't exist. There's no way that, like, later on, like element 115, like he said, hey, you know what? This is element 115. This is what we're using, what they're using to power these gravitational engines. And come to find out, a lot of these things, like element 115, was later confirmed to be true, as well as many of the things that the S3 site was later confirmed to be true. They all wrote him off as a whack job, just trying to come up with some story and try to get get famous when a lot of the stuff he's confirmed has been confirmed, post tense. And then, the crazy thing too is like, I remember watching that, and I've rewatched that interview multiple times. And then some of his later stuff with Jeremy Corbell.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the dude's been pretty consistent throughout the years.
So I've watched his stuff too, and I like to think I'm a pretty good judge of someone who's being honest and open, whether or not they, maybe they're lying to themselves, but like that, you can tell they're being genuine. And Bob Lazar has never given me a vibe that he was lying about his story. He's been very consistent about it. He did get debunked by Stanton Friedman, but you look at these debunkings too, and I think you can learn a lot from the Bob Lazar case about how it's more of a psychological human condition situation where we don't want to believe something. We look for a reason to dismiss it. And I think that's what we did with Bob Lazar. We said, I don't want to believe his story, so I'm going to look for something that, look through his past, look through his education history. And maybe he embellished his education history. It's still unclear to me exactly.
Right.
But that doesn't mean his story isn't true. And the part that people, I think, don't understand, they thought, well, this guy's some random engineer that made a rocket car, so why would he be working at Los Alamos under EG&G? But what they don't realize, that's how it works. They don't hire the Neil deGrasse Tysons. They hire the people that are the engineers that are thinking outside the box. Because you take a Neil deGrasse Tyson and you show him a UFO, he's going to have a mental breakdown. He's not going to know how to do anything with that. You show somebody like Bob Lazar, though, and it's going to intrigue him. He's going to think about it. And Bob Lazar even said to Joe Rogan, he was asked, would you do it again if given the opportunity? Would you still, go public with everything you did? He said, nope, never. He said, if I could do it again, I got to work with magical technology. He's like, I wouldn't come out and do that again. And instead, he came out and he got like discredited, his life ruined, everything about it. But now, like you said, 25 years later, suddenly now the stuff he's saying it's not faux pas anymore. It's allowed to be talked about. And a lot of stuff seems to be true, including the way he describes warp travel. He says these 3 gravity generators lock onto a point and they squeeze together, and that pulls the space-time towards them. Now, this is where I tell people, especially because I'm, just self-taught, is that just because someone doesn't say it exactly like a PhD physicist is going to say it, doesn't mean they don't know what they're talking about. Yeah. Conceptually, his perspective of how it works is right.
They could have a practical understanding of the science and not necessarily a technical way to speak about it.
Exactly. And here's something that I'll tell you that I've only said a couple times, but I spoke to a reporter that wanted to know about 0-point energy and stuff like that. And they were able to get in touch with Bob Lazar. And they told me, I got permission to say this, that Bob Lazar thought 0-point energy is all bullshit. And this is crazy to me because you start to realize like how dysfunctional we are. The guy that's like revealing the technology, one of the first OGs to reveal is put Area 51 on the map. He doesn't even realize that like 0-point energy is the answer for what he's describing and how that works. Because like I said, his conceptual viewpoint may be slightly different, but he still can know what's possible, what we can do. So it goes to show you several things. One, even very smart people can miss the mark. Even very smart people can be brainwashed into ridiculing something that is possibly very real. And this is how and why they've been able to keep this secret for so long, because like I was saying before, they didn't start with a Boeing 777. This has been something
people within the same field, and we see this all the time, can also have differing viewpoints on certain things. And that's where things get a little bit messy, is like when people get in their own little camps within the same, I don't care if you're talking about conspiracy theories, there's UFOs, there's not UFOs, like immediately those two people start shitting on each other, trying to undermine their credibility one way or the other. I mean, that just happens. And that's going to happen in science. It happens in, I don't care if you're talking about shooting sports, every industry, like there are those people out there within their own little camps. And it's natural tribalism, I think, a lot of it. Hey folks, just for giggles, and I see a lot of, I don't know, opinions over there on Bob Lazar. I just posted a poll. Real simple. Do you think Bob Lazar is legit or not? Go hit that poll on our YouTube page. I want to hear from you guys. I'm curious to see where Bob Lazar is 35 years later in people's headspace. Do you believe him? Do you think he was right? Do you think he's being honest? And you don't have to believe that he's gotten everything right. Just, do you believe that Bob Lazar was telling the truth as he sees it? That's kind of what I want to hear and hear from that. The other thing I would highly recommend for you guys to watch, if you haven't seen before, is The Moment of Contact. There's a couple other great UFO alien contact videos out there. The Moment of Contact, I highly recommend if you haven't seen that. It is about the Virginia incident. Go check that out. I thought it was a really good and compelling and interesting, whether you believe it or not, documentary. So sometime at some point, check that out for sure. I think it's, if nothing else, it's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah.
My kids liked it.
Yeah, if I could throw in there, I would say the Age of Disclosure was pretty good for getting a high level understanding of this. Now, first thing you're going to realize when you watch a lot of these movies, it's all the same people. It's all the same people every time. And they keep doing the same movie over. For example, Hal Puthoff, Eric Davis are two of the engineers. They're these Black Project engineers that, they probably go on the weekend and work at Lockheed Martin's secret lab or what have you.
Yeah.
And I've read all their papers. And these are the guys that either they're building it directly, or these are the guys that they showed the UFOs to, and they were like, "Hey, figure out how this works." Like, there's no other option involved here. And it kind of blows me away that I'm the guy putting those pieces together, because Eric Davis is whistleblowing, talking to Anna Polina Luna in these UFO hearings. And in my mind, I'm wondering why they're asking how many races of aliens exist, when I'm going, why aren't you asking him about his teleportation physics study paper that he wrote for the Air Force Research Labs? Like, that's why he was pulled into the guy. It wasn't because he knows about the blue aliens. He was pulled in because the guy's the world's leading expert on warp drives and wormholes. So this is where I just kind of like, I was saying before, everything's kind of on a silver platter. The alien people want to know, the people that are getting abducted or have, they call experiencers. I'm not personally one, but I sympathize towards people that have traumatic experiences. They want to know, how are the aliens getting here? Well, there's your answer: wormholes. And Anna Polina Luna is even saying the aliens are interdimensional. But this is kind of a psyop too, because it makes you think, the alien's going to come out from the extra dimension, right? And he's going to be this evil monster. But really what they're saying there is that the alien is just coming from some faraway place, and it's just hopping through like a shortcut through our space-time, through an extra dimension again, to just appear here.
Right.
But at the same time, here's the big rub from all this. The big takeaway for you. If we have teleportation technology and this fusion technology, that represents free energy. You may say, well, Ashton, why? I mean, I was told thermodynamics, what have you. Well, because I'll give you a very simple, practical example. Imagine I were to convert my phone here, this mass of this phone, into energy. It would be a huge amount of energy, right? And the problem is, I want to run this energy. I want you to run this energy. The problem is, this energy is over here, and I need to get this energy over to you, over, wherever you are. And in doing that, we're going to lose a lot of it. We got to use a lot of it up to move it from one location to the other. With teleportation, we're basically saying, here's a whole bunch of energy, and I'm just passing it to you, and now you can use it the exact same amount without any losses whatsoever. Transfer energy from anywhere. So in a sense, that's a form of free energy, where you can, especially if you can do it at a very low cost, which is what seems like it's happening in the MH370 videos, because we're not seeing the planet get blown away. So here's the takeaway. If you have free energy, if you can materialize energy out of the vacuum, out of nothingness, if you can do alchemy and create elements, which is what fusion allows us to do, why do I need to go to any other world at all, ever? Everything I could ever need is right here in front of me in this volume of empty space. And I can make materials, water, air, anything I ever need, gold, anything can be produced. And we will be able to produce Star Trek replicators in the future that do that for us. So my perspective shift for you all Because people wonder, why aren't we seeing this? Why aren't the aliens coming here? Why aren't they visiting us saying that we want to talk to your leader? Because they don't care about us. We're primitive ants compared to them technologically, and they have everything. They don't even need our resources because they have unlimited resources out there. What do you think about that thought?
Well, I think if you're saying, hey, you know what, why would they come here if they had unlimited resources and energy and technology? I think there's like, for instance, right now, this is a great example. You're really interested in the technology of this, the wormholes. And I'm like, I just want to know if there's freaking aliens and if I can own a freaking UFO one day. Like, I just think that we're naturally going to have different interests. And I think no matter how much energy, no matter how much technology, no matter how many resources that we have on one planet, I don't think the desire to explore will necessarily ever leave us. So, you know, if I can, now I have this unlimited energy and I can build this technology. Now I want to know what Alpha Centauri looks like. So now I can go there and I can get there almost immediately, just using a wormhole that's very accessible to us. So not only does the technology provide that capability, but it allows me to do it very easily. And then, of course, I think no matter how advanced a society gets, you know, there's going to be scientists that are, you know, into things like anthropology, trying to understand how more primitive societies develop. And I think, you know, I don't think one excludes the other necessarily.
Well, let me throw this at you, though.
Sure.
But would you go personally, or would you just send a drone? Right? You would just send a drone, have it scan everything, and then you see, or maybe you do the avatar body thing, but, you know, it depends on how advanced you are.
Sure.
But you would just send a drone there, right? You don't need to go there because you don't breathe the air or anything like that. So to your point, we might already have those technologies to actually be able to scan other planets and be able to tell there's life there, because this same technology that allows for wormholes, free energy, fusion, it has other applications as well. One of those is that you can create telescopes that have resolution vastly more powerful than any telescope that we currently have. So one of the things I would argue, just from my own understanding of the technology and what is possible, there's almost no way the military intelligence community doesn't know about other civilizations if they are in fact out there.
Sure. Yeah, you know, I mean, all those things, I think all those things are in phases, right? I think it's very, and it's easy for us, like, to pretend that I know what some alien, depending on how their culture and everything else, and me to project my own sensibilities, wants, desires upon some alien living, you know, 300 light years away. I don't know if that works very well. I would say that is the progression of how, if we do project the way that we do things onto another alien species, like, that's how we do things. We send probes to Mars first, and then we send, you know, these robotic rovers. But the plan is to ultimately to be able to visit and ultimately establish, you know, if you're talking to Elon, he wants to establish a colony there, and you know, within 20 years. So I don't know, you know, I don't, just because they have that capability, they might have had that capability 500 years ago. And now it's like, okay, so now we can visit personally without any real risk.
Here's a scary thought. Let me add to that. What if they didn't have that technology 500 years ago? What if they had that technology 1,000,000 years ago?
Exactly.
Or like 1,000,000,000 years ago, right? I think that part of the problem is we really want to personify aliens. We want to make that, we want to put our human, feelings, impressions, everything onto the aliens. But aliens could be so advanced that we just literally can't even understand them. Aliens could be AI. Aliens could be partially biological, partially computerized. Aliens could even be, some people are speculating that plasma itself, like we're seeing these plasma orbs, maybe plasma can be stable long enough to develop consciousness. People are even speculating. So I think we have to start thinking like way outside the box when it comes to advanced alien life, not just microbes and stuff like that, which I think are probably everywhere, but like actually stuff that can rival, you know, the complexity of a human being. That's one challenge I would throw at people. Another fun one is this. Did you ever watch The Three Body Problem?
Oh, yeah. One of my favorite shows. Okay. Folks, we haven't watched The Three Body Problem. Go
We're
check that out.
spoiling it right now. Get ready.
It's on Netflix, right?
Yeah. But I love that because the three body problem explains the problem of time dilation to people, especially when it comes to two different civilizations. Now, time dilation is a very important thing to understand, which means that our flow of time is based on the rock that we're on, the Earth. The more gravity there is, the slower our flow of time is relative to other planets. What this means is that if you were to take our planet and compare to another alien civilization on a different planet, our times are going to be flowing differently. Like if we were to look at each other, one of us is going to look like we're moving in slow motion and one of us is going to look like we're moving in super speed. But what this means from a practical standpoint is the one moving in super speed is evolving faster than the one moving super slow. So in three body problem, what this means is the aliens are trying to come visit Earth and they're super more advanced than we are as humans. But by the time they get to Earth, we've already surpassed them because we've already caught up at that point. This is something that people should think about from the cosmic perspective, because all civilizations that are out there, wherever they are, they're not all advancing at the same rate. They're advancing at different rates depending on the time dilation of the planet that's around them, which is a weird thing to think about.
No, it definitely is. Well, it's interesting you say that. I had never thought about it in that way. But are you familiar with the Aerial School UFO event in South Africa?
Yep.
So
Yep.
what's interesting about that is, so for people that don't know, and I definitely recommend you go research that. I actually got a video pulled up. Maybe we'll play portions of that. So all these kids there's like 15, 20 kids. I don't know how many of them, a bunch of kids. And they all describe the same thing of UFO lands, some beings get out. But what's interesting about that is they said that they're moving in slow motion. So if, they have a craft that's generating the same gravity as, that they're used to, and that's kind of what the implication here is that because they are, they said the whole time that they were moving in what looked like slow motion. So I just think that's an interesting concept that I never thought about before.
Yeah, because what it means too is if you're making a gravitational wave, you're developing artificial gravity. You're changing your flow of time. This means that any UFO that's using this field propulsion mechanism is by definition a time machine. Now, this is the thing about time travel. And because anyone that starts asking about teleportation, first question people should be asking is, can I go back in time? This is the big paradox people have when it comes to wormholes. They get concerned. If you have faster than light apparent travel, can you have retro causality? Can you change the past? And so I've dug into this probably more than most people on this planet. The number one expert on this idea is John Kramer of the University of Washington. And long story short, you can't go to the past. Somehow these EPR experiments, even though it should theoretically be possible, something happens. Nature steps in and collapses down the wave function is how they describe it, making it so that you cannot send information back in time. So what it means is the teleportation can only be either instantaneous or you can go to the future, but you can never go what we would think of as going back to the past. So there are limits, rules to how this technology works. It's not just do whatever you want. And this also speaks to what people say about, they say, if the aliens have these UFO technology, why are they crashing? Well, because this technology is not foolproof. It's got limits. It's got weaknesses. It's got strengths. It's not just invincibility mode. And I think once people start to look at it from that perspective, a lot of the questions that people have and skepticism starts to kind of crumble away.
Well, the other speculation on that is that us launching nuclear bombs disrupts that technology. And there has been some overlap with nuclear testing, along with, and probably the most famously is the Roswell incident. That alleged crash was attributed to nuclear testing nearby. And that's one of the things that they've talked about. Hey, just for giggles, there's a short video right here. Let's show everybody the Aerial School incident. I think it's a fun video to discuss. And I think it's one of the more credible sites because this was documented so well by so many people. And they've even went back and interviewed these kids, 15, 20 years later, and they're still saying the same thing.
1 Rua 1994.
We'll see if this is the best video I could have picked or not.
On Friday morning, September 16, 1994, the area school in Ruwa, Zimbabwe experienced a phenomenon that has since become one of the most notable incidents in UFO history. At 10 a.m., the children were outside playing while their teachers attended a staff meeting. A few minutes into their break, the kids noticed something unusual near the edge of their playing field, an area covered in long grass and thorn bushes. Other children then described seeing a silver saucer-shaped object flying across the sky before landing near the trees. They described seeing two beings about 4 feet tall, dressed in tight black bodysuits with narrow, pale faces and large black eyes that had an almost plastic appearance. Many children ran away, but some of the older kids stayed to observe as the beings moved closer. One student described their movement as bouncy, almost like they were running in slow motion or moving on the moon. The kids were just a few feet away and described the scene as glitchy, as if the craft and beings were flickering. One of the figures eventually stopped directly in front of them, and in interviews, the children over and over again focused on its eyes that they found they couldn't look away from. After looking into the being's eyes, several children reported receiving telepathic messages. One fifth grader said that they were warned about something that's going to happen, emphasizing that pollution must not be. The only adult outside was a tuck shop attendant who was soon overwhelmed by the kids' stories. They claimed to have seen 3 or 4 objects coming through the power lines and landing in the bushes. UFO investigator Cynthia Hind was one of the first to document this incident, describing it as one of the most exciting UFO stories of that or any other year. She recorded the children's testimonies, which came from a diverse group of Black African, Asian, and white Zimbabwean children, and noted that they interpreted the event through their own cultural backgrounds. For instance, some Black children thought the beings resembled Rikwambo or Tokoloshi's supernatural goblins in Shona and Ndebele folklore, causing them to burst into tears, fearing they would be eaten. After break ended, the kids shared their experience with teachers who were skeptical. But the story spread to parents, many of whom visited the school the next day, eager to discuss it with faculty. With pressure from parents and Hind's involvement, the school asked the kids to draw what they saw. The children's drawings were strangely consistent, and although they interpreted the figures differently based on their backgrounds, their descriptions of the craft and beings were remarkably similar. Hind believed that the diverse interpretations, combined with similar visual accounts, strengthened the validity of the story. Hind's involvement brought the story to the attention of Dr. John Mack, a Harvard psychiatrist and Pulitzer Prize-winning author known for his research on UFO sightings and alien abductions. Dr. Mack, who had even appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show, flew from the US to Zimbabwe in November to interview the children.
We're talking today with Harvard University psychiatrist John Mack, who studied the cases of about 100 people, at least, who claim that they've been abducted by aliens.
While some teachers and parents were skeptical, he was able to convince them not to dismiss the children's experience as lies. Mack was intrigued by the environmental warnings the children reported, similar to the messages given to other so-called experiences that he had studied.
Now, if these are real experiences, what is going on? What's the source of these experiences?
That's the question. What's going on?
The days and weeks following brought additional witness accounts. A local woman reported seeing an orange glow over a chicken run.
I just saw a glow over my chicken run, a very orange glow.
And in Kariba, a man claimed to see a glowing object transform into 2 orange-red balls in the sky.
Can you just tell us what happened the other night at Kariba?
We suddenly looked up and we saw this thing coming over the top of the hill. But then one thing we noticed about it was the lack of sound. In total, I would say about 14 people saw this in our group.
All right, Ashton. So, I mean, that's pretty consistent with some of the more credible UFO accounts. What do you make of that? And how do you think that plays into everything else that you've talked about.
Yeah, people probably don't know or even remember because it was so long. It was early in the investigation. I actually spoke to one of the aerial school investigators. He was on one of my X spaces. Still remember it like it was yesterday because that was one of the first UFO lores that I kind of looked into. Like I said, I didn't really know much about the UFO topic or lore. And I found it to be really credible because, like you said, the kids still are now, they're now adults and they all stick to their story. And it was a lot of kids that saw this event that happened. So if you do believe that aliens are visiting us or what have you, to me, that's one of the best stories out there. Now, at the same time, you can't really, given the context of the technology that we now know about and that I've been talking about here, you can't really definitively say, was that, humans in a suit or was it aliens? Like, they say they were very small, so hard to say on that front. But yes, I think there are several cases that are very compelling. The problem has always been that there's always been some way to very easily dismiss them. This is why the MH370 situation is so unique, is that it's not just videos of a fuzzy light. It's not just one video, it's multiple. And there's a real world event. There's a real missing plane. Still to this day, that plane is still missing. And so you've got this overwhelmingly compelling story that also has evidence with it. If those aerial school kids, if that happened in 2025 and all those kids had their smartphones and they were recording it, we might have straight up catastrophic disclosure right now, right? But unfortunately, we don't. And that's why when people ask me, like, well, Asher, are these orbs the same orbs as the Foo Fighters? I don't know, man. That was like the 20s or 30s or 40s, whenever the Foo Fighters was. I don't know how we know. We don't have footage and stuff like that from back then,
No, that's pretty interesting. Somebody was bringing up, I don't know that I've heard about this, but the Westall UFO Australia experience. Just for giggles, here's a quick 3-minute video. Let's play this to see what it has to say on that.
I'm here with Graham Whitehead, the city historian at the city of Kingston. We're sitting in his office here down at Parkdale Library, and Graham was after telling me that there was a UFO spotted in the city of Kingston in 1966, which I find it difficult to believe. But tell us the story, Graham.
Well, it wasn't the city of Kingston then, of course. It was a former municipality. But the story is that some students from Westall High School saw this UFO, and they believed it landed in the Grange.
So they saw it,
or at least it hovered in the Grange. It may not have actually landed, but they saw it there, and this created a tremendous amount of excitement at the school. And there are a lot of mysteries about it now. People swear that it happened. Other people are skeptical.
So how many people actually saw the UFO?
I'm not sure the actual number, but there were, a substantial number of students who saw it, say they saw it. This thing in the sky, and they had descriptions for it. But the interesting thing was that the principal of the school clamped it all down. And this principal was Frank Sambleby. And he taught me at school.
Okay.
So I can remember him well.
So was it seen in the middle of the night or the middle of the day?
No, it was in the middle of the day.
Okay.
The students were outside in the grounds. There was a phys ed lesson going on. And then the rumor about it, or the story about it, spread like wildfire through the school.
Was Moorabbin Airport around at the time when any of the planes?
Yes, Moorabbin Airport was there, and that was one of the theories that was put forward. It was just a plane from Moorabbin Airport that they saw. No, they said it was nothing like an aeroplane. Nothing like an aeroplane. And people explored at the airport to say, were there planes in the air at that time? No. So, the skeptics were saying all these various things, and people were knocking them down.
So what did this flying saucer look like? Any accurate descriptions?
Well, they did talk about it as being a silver object and round, and just the normal UFO sort of story that we hear about today.
And I believe this group got together again recently, or in the last 12 months to...
Yes.
And they're still sticking with the story?
I think it was a couple of years ago that they had a reunion over at the Grange where this landing took place. And they were very strong about the story. They were quite definite that it had happened, and what they saw, they're sticking to that story.
You know, one of the biggest questions I always have when it comes to UFOs is if they have so much technology, how do they just kind of slip up and allow us to see them? I think that is a very good question and criticism of all of it.
Yeah, so I'll answer part of that. Number one, they should be able to be invisible, no question. They should be, if any alien civilization's a million years more advanced than us, they're going to be able to be perfectly cloaked anywhere they go. One of those defense intelligence reference documents, the DIRDs, I recommend people check them out, read them. They were declassified in like 2017. It's all about cloaking. And it basically starts at the most basic level of cloaking to get to the most advanced. When you get to the most advanced, it's actually just space-time manipulation, warping space light all the way around you with space-time manipulation, bending the light like a black hole. They say that's the best form of cloaking.
Real quick, you said the DIRDs, spell that for me.
Defense Intelligence Reference Documents, DIRDS.
Okay.
Yep. The Defense Intelligence Reference Documents. Hal Puthoff talked about them on his Joe Rogan appearance last year. And they are papers that include things such as high-powered lasers, aneutronic fusion propulsion, warp drives, traversable wormholes, extracting quantum energy, all of these concepts that Hal Puthoff is the one that, through the Defense Intelligence Agency, got these commissioned. And the idea was he went to his Black Project program engineers and physicist friends, and he said, write up these papers about these topics that are breakthrough technologies that will be available by 2025 or 2050, like in this next time period. And they wrote them. And when you read them, I don't know how anybody that's in the UFO community can't just go, oh, here's the UFO technology. Because it's pretty clear that that's what these all add up to: high-powered lasers, fusion propulsion, all this stuff. And this, in my opinion at least, directly connects these people like Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis to the program, to the Department of Energy, the Air Force, and they're writing papers for these people too. So that's where I think that's being hidden. One more thing I want to talk about real quick, so before I forget, is the fusion bomb thing. I don't think a lot of people know this story, but there's a man named Ferris Williams, P-H-A-R-I-S. Ferris Williams, he was a Navy guy, and he was also a physicist. He never got a PhD, and he was never restricted by academia to just only study what you want to study. And he found out that the thermonuclear weapons calculations were off. Not off by a little bit, off by 50%. As in, the calculations in the books were 50% too low. The real yield is 150% of what was being calculated. And you would say, that's insane. There's no way a random guy corrected our thermonuclear weapons calculations. But not only did he do it, it eventually led to a big enough stink that there was a whole tribunal about it, where he went up against the Navy's top scientists. And he was able to convince them, just using a calculator, that he was right. And I just think about this story, and this isn't a myth or anything. You got Oak Shannon of Lawrence Livermore telling this. This is his best friend, Ferris Williams, Willie, he calls him. And he's just telling this story about it, and you're like, okay, first question, how did he figure it? What was it that he figured out? That is, how did you, 50% difference is a huge amount. The answer is it's classified. Nobody knows. To this day, nobody knows. So here you go. I say, okay, I'm an investigator. I'm not satisfied with that. So all you have to do is learn about the guy. Turns out Oak Shannon says he was his best friend. He says Ferris Williams, after he figured out that these guys were all wrong on the math for nuclear weapons, he decided that the experts, the academics, they must be completely off about physics. There must be something fundamentally wrong with what we're doing to teach physics. So he came up with his own theory called the dynamic theory. And the only major difference between his theory and everybody else's understanding of relativity and everything is he added an extra dimension. It's called the 5-dimensional approach. So instead of just up, down, left, right, forward, back in time, he added one more dimension for mass density. And this is relevant for thermonuclear weapons because in a fusion bomb, we're trying to make a black hole, basically. We're trying to squish down this material as much as we can. And so you'd say, well, wait a minute. Ferris Williams says he corrected the thermonuclear weapon calculations and he added an extra dimension, and that extra dimension is mass density. This is exactly also what you need to make a gravitational wave. So I look at this and I go, oh boy, like this guy figured out there was an extra dimension. That's why the calculations were so far off. And then the government just shut that all down, silenced all that. He's never allowed to get famous off of figuring that all out. And instead, they just give him some contracts, a bunch of NDAs, all goes dark. And this would imply that there's this whole bunch of excess energy. Maybe a fusion bomb really is able to make a wormhole or a black hole, or maybe a black hole is a wormhole for all we know. So I just wanted to throw that little lore out there for you. True story, by the way.
No, that's pretty interesting. So you kind of, it sounds like you're kind of under the assumption that like, hey, this is just secret government tech, not necessarily extraterrestrial tech.
I'm open to both sides of it. Like if you were to ask me, who do I think in the UFO community is most right? It's going to be probably Dr. Stephen Greer, because he's basically saying, yeah, there's this alien origin. Like we figured this technology out, and maybe that spurred our technological advancement. But he's saying we are also building our own versions of this. And we've got most of what you're seeing out there is us, because maybe the aliens don't need to visit us. Right. And this is what I would say. This is actually another angle I wanted to go into, is that I think there's a lot of people that are out there that are seeing stuff that is man-made, but that's being misidentified as aliens because they don't have a frame of reference. I could even see it happening in the NSA, that like people are in the NSA, you're an intelligence officer in the NSA, but you're low level and you're watching some surveillance and you see those orbs. You would be like, whoa, there's the aliens. There's proof of aliens. That's not human. But you would have no idea that we've got black projects and unacknowledged special access programs that are working on that kind of stuff. And you might not understand the physics either. So to me, I could see how it would be very easy for that to develop. However, I'm totally open to the idea of aliens being real. And my own worldview or universe view is that life is everywhere, that there's bacterial life everywhere, and that advanced life, given enough time, is going to advance. We're going to find life, I think, everywhere. Like the moment we stop looking for electromagnetic signals and start looking for gravitational signals, or I think the whole universe is personally going to light up. But this is my question to you. What would it mean to you? Because I think you are a guy that, you want, alien, maybe you want aliens to be real, or you want there to, you'll be excited by them being real. What would it mean to you? How would it change your life? Or what would you want to have happen if Trump comes out and says, yep, Gary, aliens are real, man. They're out there and there's a lot of them.
Oh, I don't know that it would, I think like a lot of people, I just hate government secrecy on such a big topic. I think that is information that if they're holding on to that information, that is information that they should give the entire planet. And Hal Puthoff talked about this, about disclosing, right? So he talked about the fact that he sat around in a room with a bunch of really smart guys that were well informed on this topic, and they went around and tried to make a decision of whether or not they should disclose this information. And so they started coming up with pros and cons. And because the cons of the negative downsides of disclosing that information, that hey, there's life out there, they decided to continue to withhold and not disclose that information. So I think it's a matter of truth for me. I would find it very interesting. I would also find it very interesting for those of us that are religious to how to reconcile all of that information. But to me, I don't think, it also feels like, whether we're talking about the government, the media, like it feels like we're getting conditioned to be more accepting of that. And I just see that trajectory, and I feel like that is intentional, right? So I feel like it's coming, that disclosure is coming. And I think most of the world already believes that. As a matter of fact, folks, I put another poll up, had it linked in the description there, or actually in the comments, of whether or not you believe that UFOs were extraterrestrial technology and or secret government technology. So I'd be interested to see what you have to say about that. I do want to say, which probably about what I expected. We got 40 votes. Is Bob Lazar legit? 70% say yes, 30% say no. You got additional time to go and give your vote on that. Almost opposite so far. UFOs, extraterrestrial, or secret government tech. 40% of you say it's ET. Basically, 60% of you say it's secret government tech. So that's
I'm changing minds out here.
That's a weird shift there.
Let me ask you, because you brought up a great story right there. The Hal Puthoff disclosure story, one of the most important stories that I think anybody interested in UFOs can tell. Because I would argue that you answered your own question right there. Hal Puthoff gets pulled in, it was like the early 2000s, so under Bush or something like that. Pull in a bunch of old white dudes, most likely. I'm not trying to be, virtue signal DEI. I'm just saying it is what it is. Pull all these old white dudes in, and they're like, hey,
white people that make nothing but bad decisions.
These are the colonizers.
There was no minorities there. There was no LGBTQ they're representing. My God, man.
We did not have the representation we needed. Obviously, that was the problem. We just needed more DEI representation. We would have made the right choice.
To shoot the place up.
So anyway, he goes there and they're like, hey, let's come up with a list and pros and cons to tell people about the truth about aliens. I mean, I'm just saying it how it is, right? And they go through the list and they're like, oh, well, society will collapse, the economy will fall apart, the stock market will collapse. A bunch of people are going to blow their brains out because, I don't want to need the disturbing thing for YouTube or whatever, but people are going to have self-harm situations occur because they've been lied to their whole lives. And so they add up all this stuff and they all agree, no, we can't do it. It's all negative. We just can't do it. Which I can't believe that's how they're making a decision, but I kind of can believe it at the same time. But here's the point. Why can't they do it though? Because the moment they tell you that the aliens are real, you're going to have a million questions, the same questions you're asking me. You're going to be like, where are they coming from? How are they getting here? What's their power source for their UFO? What's the implications of this technology? And those are the tough questions. And the ones like, hey, how long have we known about this? How long have we been reverse engineering this technology in secret? And like, could we have had like the Jetsons going on right now? This is what Dr. Stephen Greer talks about. The best documentary is the what is it? The stolen, the Lost Century. Have you watched that one?
I believe I have with Stephen Greer.
Yeah. Where he goes through like the cover up of free energy and how they've had this technology known about it for over 100 years, but because they suppressed it, it's basically changed the trajectory of our technological advancement. And this doesn't mean we don't have cool things. We got cool stuff like iPhones like this, right? But we're missing a whole angle to what's possible. And it opens the door to not just teleportation, which is already amazing enough, free energy. This actually opens the door to longevity. Like we might be able to live forever. Go ahead. What is
I think we can, folks, you can go check this out, The Lost Century and How to Reclaim It with Stephen Greer. Of course, this what I have right here isn't showing it very well. But you can go check that out. Let me scroll this up. There we go.
You can watch it for free too online, I think. So yeah.
Stephen Greer has been a part of a lot of interesting things. Some of it, I don't buy everything that he says, but I've actually tried to contact him and would love to have him on the show. What I do know is like he lives in Northern Virginia. He lives like, I don't know, probably an hour away from me at most. So Stephen Greer, if you end up watching this, number one, I'd love to have you on the show, but more importantly, I'd love to come to your house and do an in-person interview and a podcast. That'd be freaking awesome. And I'd like to kind of dial in on some of the different things that he says. Let's talk a little bit about, because I think there's a very active disinformation campaign that goes on that's kind of embedded and weaved all throughout this. You know, one of the interesting things that Hal Puthoff talks about too is like he talks a lot about oh God, not astral projection, but
remote viewing.
What's that?
Remote viewing, is that what you're talking
about?
Remote
viewing, yes. So he talks about being involved in a lot of remote viewing and how effective That has been, and it's weird to see the crossover with him being who he is, and you know, getting into that and how there's some, I don't know, entanglement there for sure.
Do you know the Ben Rich story?
No.
Ben Rich was director of Lockheed Martin Skunk Works back in the 90s, and he started saying some pretty crazy things, like that anything you can imagine, we've already figured out and it's locked up in black projects. So it'll never be made available to the public. Said that we had the ability to take ET home. And so people are rightfully going, what is this guy talking about? Because he's a part of a major defense contractor who's building stuff for the military. So a guy asks him, right, says, okay, you say all this crazy stuff. He goes, how is it that we can, you know, how is this possible? How is like teleportation possible, or wormholes, whatever? And he says, well, let me answer that question by asking you a question. He says, how is ESP possible? And the guy thinks about it, and he tells Ben Rich, all points in space and time are connected. And Ben Rich says, exactly. Now, what does that tell us? He's directly connecting this idea of ESP, extrasensory perception, could also be replaced by remote viewing, with this idea of a wormhole, space-time manipulation. The idea of even connecting quantum entanglement to a wormhole is actually a real theorem called ER equals EPR. Why was Hal Puthoff super interested in remote viewing in the 60s and 70s, SRI, and then he makes the jump suddenly, 1987, his first paper about zero-point energy, the ground state of the hydrogen atom, where he basically argues every atom is like a perpetual motion machine. And if we squeeze it, we can get a little bit of energy out of it, because every atom is in this sea of energy and it's constantly replenishing its own energy from this sea of energy, which means there's something to extract there. And technically what we're extracting is the 0-point energy when we do that. So you watch Hal Puthoff make this jump from remote viewing to this idea of this infinite sea of energy. And it's directly analogous to what Ben Rich is telling that guy. He's saying that the same phenomenon that allows us to hop through space-time could, in theory, allow for psychic powers. Now, my personal opinion, I think it's kind of all bullshit. I mean, I think it might be theoretically possible if you know, do some CRISPR stuff and start messing around people's DNA and what have you. But I don't.
That's kind of my point. If we're using Hal Puthoff as an example of, hey, this is corroborating certain aspects of it, but then we have Hal Puthoff also talking about something else that you think is bullshit. Like, how do you reconcile those two things?
That's what's tough. And even Stephen Greer, I don't agree with Stephen Greer on everything. He's all into the CE5 and Bijou, Ambassador Bijou's visiting us from the Andromeda galaxy. And like, I'm like, bro, why are you talking about that? I'm like, why don't you just keep it to the, you know, secret military technology? Like, why bring that? Why bring the interdimensional ghost aliens into this? Like, it just ruins
and Stephen Greer is even getting involved with like the tridactyls down in Peru and everything else. Which
stay away from that too. Even if it's real, like it's not. There's no good resolution to that, right? Like,
but it's fun. It's fun. It's interesting. But
I don't want to judge people too harshly, because they do the same thing to me about MH370, and they say, "Oh, that's silly. Don't talk about it. Don't talk to him." So I don't try to. I say, you know, whatever you're interested in. But your point, to answer your question, how do you work through all of this? Yeah. And the answer is, you shouldn't throw anybody out. Do the same thing that I did for the MH370 case. I said, I'm not going to let my biases control this. I'm going to take all the evidence. I'm going to pull it all in and analyze it piece by piece, irregardless of who's telling me, irregardless of what other stories that person has told me. Some people will say, don't listen to Eric Davis. He lied about this. Doesn't mean he's lying about something else. Doesn't mean he's lying about his knowledge about warp drives. So I take it piece by piece, and I don't throw somebody out just because I disagree with them on one thing or another. So I think that's probably the thing.
And, you know, that's the thing with conspiracy theories, and that's how I try to approach all these things is again, you got to independently assess every situation, not just say, hey, because one thing's true, this is true. Because I do think when you're talking about disclosure, that is one of the problems that will definitely have with disclosure, is if they ever do come out and say, oh, look, we're just coming clean. There was aliens. Roswell was legit. All the things they're going to talk about. What people are going to make that leap is like all of these conspiracies and all these things were true and we were lied to. And of course, you know, there's elements of that you're always going to get from a government. That being said, the reason that so many of us believe certain conspiracies is that there is a lot more evidence that supports one or the other. And I think it's really smart to sit back and independently analyze every situation and every element of that situation before you just go, oh, well, you know, JFK was killed by the government, so therefore Charlie Kirk was killed by the French-Israeli assassins that planned it all down in Fort Huachuca. Like, you gotta assess all those things individually, and I think that is the key. And stay evidence-based, and don't let the like you said. I know I have a proclivity, like, I want to see some aliens, man. I want to ride a spaceship. But that being said, I'm not going to allow myself to be tricked, because that is one of the big elements of all this that we know for a fact, is that there is some deception taking place. Project Blue Book, one of its main objectives was basically to trick the U.S. population into believing that anything they see was, you know, swamp gas, weather balloons. And part of that was to undermine the credibility of these people, where we get this idea that, like, oh, you saw a UFO? Okay, they're fruitcake. You know, that was something that they planned and coordinated.
And you know what's funny about that is that people were saying that about me at first when I was talking about this, because I'm like, hey, this is teleportation we're seeing in these videos. And they're like, no, he's trying to make the UFO thing sound silly. I'm like, wait, why are you acting like the UFO thing has a whole bunch of credibility right now? Because A, you need a way for the aliens to get here. And I'm telling you, here it is, you know? So I thought that part was a little funny, but you're right about the skepticism thing. Like, the problem is now also that if they do admit it, if Trump comes and says aliens are real, you're already seeing it with the Epstein files. They're like, conspiracy theorists are right about everything. And part of the problem is now you start to paint with this broad brush. And now they're going, oh yeah, Epstein was turning kids into jerky and eating them. You're like, okay, bro, you took it like 10 steps too far right there. Like, yes, Epstein was a bad person. He did bad things, but you're taking it too far there. And this is why I also came out and disavowed Candace Owens, even though I was on her show, more than 1 million views on her show. It's just because at the end of the day, there has to be a line for this. There simply was not evidence for somebody else having shot Charlie Kirk, and I'm just being impartial about it. That's just my opinion.
I agree.
And this is where people would tell me, and they would attack me. They would say, how can you say that conspiracy theory is not true when you say that some orbs teleported a plane? Which admittedly is a lot crazier of a claim than saying that somebody else killed a guy, right? I don't disagree, but I've got the evidence to go along with it. If you show me 2 videos in sync of somebody else shooting Charlie Kirk, then I'm going to change my mind.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing, but that doesn't exist, right? So to me, that's what I hope. If they do come and admit that the aliens are real and what have you, and that, you know, we do that, that's where we're going to need people like you and like other people that can draw that line and say, hey guys, let's not go completely over the crazy cliff here. You know, yes, we do have directed energy weapons. That doesn't mean that they're always beaming them into your house and messing with your brain every moment at the same time, right? It's because some people take it too far. And I think that's a real challenge. And partly part of one of the main reasons, one of the under talked about reasons on why disclosure doesn't happen, is that the psychological aspect of what will happen, and not from the people that Reddit wants you to think. Reddit wants you to think that the religious people are going to freak out, that they're going to have a crisis and mental breakdown. Not going to. I've talked to those people on a lot of podcasts, guys. Not them. The ones that are going to freak out are the ones that are convinced that there's 27 genders and that the only thing that saved them from a cold virus was a mask over their face because the government told them that was the case. And they're going to freak out because they're now going to find out that their government is capable of lying to them at a massive scale, and they ate it up without even questioning it. And they're going to start to wonder, what else have I been getting lied about? What else could the government have lied to me about? That's what they're afraid. Those are the people that are going to completely lose it. And those are the ones I'm really afraid of going way off the deep end. Because when you go too far one direction, you end up rebounding back the other way and going full on, everything's a conspiracy.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed discussing the UFO topic, aliens, wormholes, all the things. And I haven't ever met a religious person that I've discussed that with and be like, hey, you know, what if we found out today, hey, a UFO landed at the White House lawn and UFO aliens got out. Would you have a crisis of faith? And like, I've never met anyone that like, no, that really doesn't play into it. Just because the Bible doesn't talk about it doesn't mean that it isn't true, or that it exists. Conversely, like you said, I do think those people, whether I don't care where they are politically, that have no foundation of principles and logic structure, those are the ones that where it's all going to fall apart on them, and they're going to have a identity crisis, if you will, of trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong. And again, we see this, like we see people that choose a conspiracy theory with no evidence whatsoever versus something that they may not like, but there's a ton of evidence, and all that evidence that is very real not only provides that much more proof that that is what took place, but it also, you know, completely contradicts over here where you're choosing that it doesn't have evidence, but you're believing it in spite of evidence too. And that's where we start getting into the realm of religion, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that even a lot of the alien believer people have fallen into that realm, which is also a little scary because it keeps it makes us vulnerable to like the Project Bluebeam narrative that's out there that, you know, they will, because you could imagine if a bunch of these plasma orbs were to just come down, everyone's going to think it's an alien invasion, right? And you could have the whole War of the Worlds thing going on. So I think that there's a certain aspect of if people are too into a certain idea, they're going to leave themselves open and vulnerable to psychological manipulation. So we have to be very careful about that as well. And so even for both sides, like that's why I tell people I'm open to any answer to all of this. It's just that the evidence is so compelling. And I would argue anybody that doesn't believe so, read those DIRDs, those Defense Intelligence Reference Documents. Go realize that those are the people talking in these UFO movies that are making, and then think about why are they making those movies and why do they keep making them with the same people saying kind of the same stuff. You said it earlier, essentially they're conditioning us. It seems very obvious they're conditioning us for something here to drop something into our lap. And that's part of the reason people may ask Ashton, they say, if you're right about this plane and all this and that was a special operation, why are you alive? Why is Edward Lynn, the guy that you say leaked these videos, alive? Part of it because no one's going to believe this shit. I mean, really still to this day, very few people still believe, of course, because it's just so hard to believe. But also I think they want some of this to come out. They want the public to be more and more conditioned to it. And who knows, maybe they're doing a poor job. I'd argue that people really don't seem to care about aliens or anything in general for the most part. People I talk to, I think, you know, some people are interested, but a broad scale, not. And so maybe they need this. Maybe they want somebody like me or you for us talking about this because it demystifies it. It makes people more talk about it, you know?
Yeah, it normalizes it. And again, it makes us more susceptible to accept it and believe it. But I think you hit on it. That's really what it comes down to. When there's a certain amount of people that live in an evidence-based reality, and then there's those that live in their own reality of what they think it should be, and you know, kind of go through the world with their feelings, thoughts, and I don't know, a little bit of utopia on their brains as opposed to going by what the evidence tells us. So, and I think that does make us very susceptible to believing bullshit and being manipulated from the outside in. I got a quick video I want to play for you guys. This is meant to be a political video, but I think it applies to having a strong mind and having cognitive security from every aspect. So I'm going to play this real quick, and then after that, we'll take some questions. We are going to prioritize super chats. I know there's a bunch up there already, and then we will try to get to as many live ones as well. Let me work by date here. All right.
Here's why talking politics with the modern left feels like banging your head against a wall. Anyone who has ever tried knows the feeling. You present facts, evidence, or plain common sense, and what comes back is a wave of emotional outrage. The worst part is that it's no longer possible to live a normal life without running into politics. Schools, workplaces, museums, sports, entertainment, universities.
And folks, I want us to, again, this is true if you believe in anything without evidence. And this is what we run into when we get into these debates of conspiracies. This is true, this is not true. When you are completely sold on something that has no foundation of reality, this is what you run into, and this is what you're susceptible to.
Every corner of life has been swallowed by ideology. We live in a society held hostage by people who insist their fantasies outrank reality. And the reason is simple. We are being tyrannized by delusions. Most people debate from reality outward, but the modern left debates from utopia inward. This inversion comes straight from the Frankfurt School, the intellectual factory that produced nearly every strand of woke dogma now embedded in academia and the public sector. Their central idea was the utopian horizon. Imagine a world without hierarchy or domination, then condemn the real world for failing to match the fantasy. Once you understand this, the entire ideological landscape snaps into focus. They argued that the family reproduces hierarchy and must be reimagined. Schools must radicalize children against power structures instead of educating them. Culture manufactures consent, therefore culture must be engineered. Even language encodes power and must be bent to social justice aims. In this worldview, every institution is guilty unless proven innocent, and innocence is impossible because the benchmark is utopian perfection. So critical theory always finds oppression. If a system works, it's stabilizing power. If a system fails, that's also power at work. If people consent, they're duped by power. If they dissent, the system shaped their frustration. It's a closed loop. You're not debating ideas, you're debating someone who believes the real world is illegitimate by default. Modern offshoots, such as critical race theory, gender theory, decolonization studies, and feminism, all use the same engine. Imagine a utopian world. Identify gaps between their imagination and the real world. Declare those gaps as oppression, then demand society must be remade. This is why discussing politics with the modern left feels like arguing with someone who's hallucinating. They construct a perfect world in their mind, one without conflict, cost, trade-offs, or human nature, then label anything that falls short as bigotry, privilege, or violence. The obsession with race, LGBTQ politics, feminism, and decolonization is not random. It's the metric they use to measure how far reality deviates from the dream. You're not arguing with people who misread the world, you're arguing with people who believe the real world is wrong for existing.
So yeah, if I can add on that real quick too, because you see this everywhere is what I realized. The politics is ingrained in everything. It's ingrained in the UFO community. It's ingrained in academia as well. And if you take that same idea of this wokeness where you must have this belief set, and if you don't have that exact perfect belief set, then you get ostracized, you get attacked. That's also what happens to the UFO community. If you don't believe in their view of the aliens and what the technology allows and the lore, I found if you don't kiss the ring, then they, excommunicate you. In academia, if you don't believe in the standard model, if you are not trying to advance what they believe to be the collective agreed upon physics, then you get thrown out. They will say, you can't believe in a fifth dimension. The fifth dimension doesn't make any sense. It's too complicated to add that, so we're not going to do that. And you realize these are the things. This is the perspective that holds us back. So to bookend the point I was making before, you don't want to be too much of a believer in every conspiracy theory, but you also don't want to be a militant skeptic either. You want to be someone that's open-minded that can judge the facts independently and evidence.
Yeah. Yep. And apply a little bit of critical thinking. And the other thing, I hate all these terms getting hijacked. Critical thinking is not just believing in bullshit because you want to believe it. Critical thinking is applying logic and evidence-based application to what you're trying to decide is true or not. Because one of the things that the left has done to us for the last 50 years, really, is we've been sucked into this moral relativism, and now we're getting into this reality relativism. And that's kind of what he was talking about in there. It's like, hey, I want the world to be like this, and if it's not, like, all we got to do is change things around, and you just got to adapt to a reality that doesn't exist. And that's what I want you to do. And that's what we see in all of these debates. Like the lack of logic and reasoning that goes into some of these discussions, to me, is just mind blowing. Like when you sit there, you know what? I'm not even going to get up on that. But anyways, that we'll leave it with that.
It's good. Let's do some chats, super chats, or whatever.
Let's do that. Timothy Foster. Good evening, Ashton and fellow Orby ambassadors. If you're a Christian, you believe in different dimensions and dimensional beings. The Creator made our universe from things unseen to things seen. I agree with that. You know, if we're going back, I don't know, 200-300 years, and we started talking about magnetism and we started talking about magnetic fields and things like that, there are a lot of people that would be labeled as a heretic. And you're talking about mysticism, voodoo, witchcraft, whatever else. We clearly, like the Bible talks about what we would consider different dimensions. So I don't think that there's anything unbiblical about anything that we're talking about. So no. I don't know, what's your thoughts on that, Ashton?
My favorite thing to say is that there's no incompatibility between science and faith. And so with respect to all this, like you really nailed it, which is that, you know, they would have burnt you at the stake if you had an iPhone 500 years ago. So, you know, as this technology advances, our understanding and perspective advances, and it seems like it moves more and more towards the mystical, more and more towards the spiritual, as opposed to being more and more towards an atheistic view. At least in my perspective, the more I learned, when I learned that there's this extra dimension, to me, that means our universe is a construct. And that to me means that there must be a creator, because every construct has a creator. If there is some code base, some fundamental rule or structure to our reality, then someone designed that, in my opinion, or at least it speaks to intelligent design in my mind.
Yeah, it's hard to look at the universe and really understand what's going on in the cosmos and not think that there was an intelligent design behind that. I couldn't agree more. I 100% don't believe in aliens, but I'm a conspiracy theorist at heart and love this guy. Is dedicated to his theory. My mind could be changed with facts. That came up when you were talking about the MH370.
Oh, yeah. And that's still true. People always ask me, like, and I'll even say right now, they say, what would it take, Ashton, for you to admit that the videos are fake or what have you? And this is what I tell people is, if you are somebody who has a theory, you should have a way. Where are your goalposts to be falsified? You know, this is what I would challenge Candace Owens with when she's talking about the Charlie Kirk stuff. What would it take for you to admit that you're wrong and say that Tyler Robinson is the one that did it, right? So for me, the answer is find the hoaxer of the videos. There's literally nobody that made those videos. Somebody was pretending to for like a year, and I was calling them out as a fraud, and then their DMs leaked, and it was all about them faking evidence and stuff like that. There is nobody that made those videos. Or if that's not enough, find the airplane. These people are saying they know that they were tracking the airplane into the South Indian Ocean. They keep searching down there. They keep not finding it. So that's my level of how would I admit that I was wrong? So,
no, that's great. Please watch Alien Intrusion by Gary Bates. If you want a biblical perspective, there is no evidence that any UAP has ever entered our atmosphere. There are interdimensional, and all abductions are evil. I would disagree with that. There is some video footage that has been leaked that it does come from NASA that does seem to indicate planes going from outside of orbit into the atmosphere of the United States, or into the atmosphere of the Earth. So, I mean, again, I don't want to put any limitations. Just because we don't understand it with our current knowledge set doesn't mean that it contradicts anything that's biblical or spiritual or anything else.
And to me, this is just simply a matter of different conceptual viewpoint when you look at this. And this is where I'd say, let's not argue about, are they coming from space and entering the atmosphere? Or are they skipping through a wormhole from a distant point via a shortcut in an extra dimension? Either way, they're getting here, right? So that's where I don't want to argue over the minutia of it. But this is also where I think it's very important that Congress, you know, Congressman Burleson and Luna specifically, who are involved in this UFO thing, they need like people who understand the physics to explain this, because otherwise people I know are thinking when they hear interdimensional beings, you know, they're thinking like the Marvel movies and stuff. If somebody's coming from the bizarro dimension, And that, in my opinion, is not what is really going on. It's a lot more down to earth than that, as opposed to, you know, infinite dimensions and multiverses like it's a, you know, Marvel movie.
Well, one of the most interesting events that took place, obviously, is the Tic Tac with Colonel David Fravor. With that instance, we literally have visual and system tracking of some sort of object going from basically sea level all the way up to 80,000 feet. So I think that, again, and 80,000 feet is definitely outside of our atmosphere.
That's up there. Yeah. Yeah. And so we have the evidence that there is abnormal propulsion things that are occurring for sure in our atmosphere. One more point I'll bring is that those orbs may not even be able to work in outer space. They actually might be transmedium orbs, but they might. There's something called air breathing magnetohydrodynamics, also known as air breathing MHD. That's actually one of those
You're
nerds
such
as
a
well.
nerd.
I love it. I am a total nerd. Air breathing MHD. But
I would
this
have
means
beat you up in high school.
probably they now we can be friends though, now that we're adults. But the air breathing MHD, they're using the air as fuel. They're pulling the hydrogen out of the air, or they can use the hydrogen from the water. But this was funny because what these fusion or nuclear weapons engineers, they were trying to build these spacecraft that could fly. They were thinking in their heads how to build spacecraft using nuclear propulsion. And the downfall was there's not enough hydrogen out in empty space or in the vacuum of space. So they would have to build this huge net that would suck in enough hydrogen. And the more they could suck in, the faster the craft would be able to fly. And they ended up discarding it because they were like, all the people said, nope, there's not enough hydrogen, it won't work. And I just keep thinking, but won't that just work in our atmosphere? Won't that just work in the water like really, really well? Because there's plenty of hydrogen there. And I think that's what they did. I think they were like, oh, who cares about sending it into orbit? We'll do something else for that. We'll just have this plasma ball fly around. And it's basically like building up energy while just flying around through the air. So,
and you think that these objects are transmedium because they do create a gravitational field around them, so it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, the way it really works is they found out from the hypersonic crafts, the spy craft like SR-71, they would, in order to achieve those speeds, they would use something called a plasma sheath, and which is actually the same concept as air breathing MHD. They shoot a laser in front, it creates a plasma shield basically, and that plasma shield reduces drag and it reduces friction. So this is why the craft doesn't rip apart. So you can imagine all they did was realize, oh, let's just encase our drone in that. We don't need to have a person inside of a plane anymore. Just encase it in the plasma bubble. And now you've got a bubble that functionally just moves through different medium without any, apparent change in its propulsion mechanisms. And then from how it moves, yes, you could imagine that like line you see out there is almost like a gravitational wave, and it doesn't even have to be a lot of force. If that's essentially like a weightless object, you just give it a tiny push, right? And it can go whatever direction you want. And this is the trick of what they figured out is they figured out, hey, if we like make this thing really light and we use this plasma sheath and encase it, now we've created something that has 360-degree movability or maneuverability, and it has no friction, no drag. So it can be super, super efficient.
So do you think that's what we're looking at the gimbal events off of Coronado Island?
Those are harder to judge. The one that Burleson released recently, you see that Hellfire missile hitting that one where it like kind of breaks apart? That is definitely plasma. Yeah, because it doesn't collapse down to the ground. Like it gets hit and then it breaks apart, but all the pieces just keep floating. And I'm looking at them going, that's plasma 100%, because that's what plasma does, is plasma produces its own electromagnetic field. This means you can basically make a smoke ring out of plasma and it'll just keep going and it won't come apart. And so that's what, like, you're seeing that phenomenon in that video when it gets hit by that. So I think a lot of them are at minimum, they're using plasma as the way to like tap in to the 0 point energy to produce thrust, energy, etc. Plasma is like the medium by which that occurs.
Now, when we say something's transmedium, do you think there's a limitations to that? Can it go through? We've seen video of it going from air to water, but like, what does that mean? Does it mean it can go through solid objects as well? What's your thoughts on that?
I asked Salvatore Pais, that U.S. Navy engineer that's got those UFO patents. That was like one of the first things I asked him, and he was like scared to answer. Long story short, it might be able to go through straight up solid objects. Yeah. They have seen that phenomenon happen with these plasma balls, assuming there's nothing inside of it. If it's just a plasma ball, then in theory, yes, it could phase through a solid object. And you might ask, well, how is that possible? Well, remember that even an atom is like 99% empty space. It's like, or even more than that, like 99.9999% empty space. So, you know, a lot of this has to do with like Tesla and like waves and getting your waves to cancel out and what have you. But yes, in theory, you could like phase right through a solid object. And actually, there's one story. Let's just say hypothetically that, you know, you could imagine if we had submarines or other craft that are under the water. How crazy would it be if something just phased through your submarine and all of a sudden you're looking at, like, it would seem like a ghost probably, right? Just comes through your submarine. You're looking at a plasma object or something like that. Pretty creepy. And it would be a good place to hide in the ocean. That's where like Congressman Burchett and the others, they've been talking about this idea that maybe they're hiding in the oceans. I mean, this is why I say I don't know if they're coming from outer space, underwater, or if it's aliens or just a big lie. You know, all these options. Even another option would be that maybe we dug something up at like an archaeological site. Like maybe it crashed here a long time ago. There was a previous civilization. Just a lot of options.
Well, that's been said that at least like 2 or 3 crafts have been found. And matter of fact, that was a story that Bob Lazar said that he was told that like 2 or 3 of them were actually found in archaeological sites.
And if you go back, the other angle too would be the Nazis. Is that if you go back to the stories like the Nazi bell, they were using mercury plasma to cause anti-gravitational effects. That's how the lore goes. And they just gave it like a voltage, a charge on it. And you can look at mercury experiments right now. As you apply a charge to liquid mercury, it starts to spin around. And so, you know, you could even argue that, well, maybe the Nazis had figured something out. Maybe it's even a cult, because a lot of people think that the Nazis were like linked to the occult and they figured it out from that kind of stuff. So everything's on the table. Aliens, demons, angels, even future humans. So that if I'm wrong about the going back in time situation, if it turns out you can go back in time, then it might be that we created this whole universe because at some point in the future, somebody went back in time and created a time loop and we're just living in it.
Well, and that's another one of the theories. And it kind of passes the smell test that when we see these grays and we see these aliens, that is us in the future, where we've just evolved to the point that we no longer have, you know, I guess genitals, or, you know, we've gotten skinnier and skinnier because all we did was spend our time on social media and never went outdoors. And we had to have these big eyes because we never saw sunlight, or who knows. But point is, again, it's all fun to play around with.
Here's another thought though. What if it's not from the future? What if they're from the past? What if I am right? You can't go to the past, but somebody hopped in a time machine and they accidentally went like 5,000 years to the future. And now their whole civilization's gone. And now they're here and they're stuck with us, a primitive society that doesn't have anything. And they're like, oh crap, my spaceship doesn't fly anymore. They're stuck in our timeline. That would be pretty weird too, because just because they're from the past doesn't mean they're less technologically advanced than we are, right?
Sure. No, look, I don't know if you listen to Graham Hancock, but I do. I love Graham Hancock stuff. And I do believe that, you know, again, it gets a little weird when you're trying to reconcile what the Bible says as far as timelines and things like that. But I do believe that it's very likely that we had advanced civilizations in the past that were wiped out by major cataclysms. Like I'm a big nerd when it comes to monolithic and not monolithic, but you know, these large, when you're looking at Peru, the pyramids, a lot of the people think that the pyramids are much older than what they thought they were. And the fact that we can't reproduce many of these technologies and build some of these things that were built allegedly, 5,000 years ago. So, if we had some sort of advanced society that was able to skip ahead and completely miss some sort of major cataclysm that was world ending, whether that's a comet or something hitting the earth, I don't know. It's interesting. But we do have, here's that video where you're talking about, I think this is worth playing.
the coast of Yemen, showing a U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drone tracking a glowing orb as it flies over the water. Now watch closely as a different U.S. drone drops a Hellfire missile on that fast-moving orb. The missile appearing to bounce off the object, doing very little damage. The orb then zipping away unfazed. The video from October 2024 shown during a congressional hearing today on unexplained anomalous phenomena. That's the official name for UFOs.
Do you solemnly swear?
Several service members giving their own eyewitness accounts and reacting to that new video.
Does this video scare you guys? Yes or no?
Yes.
Wiggins?
Yes. Yes.
And there are big questions right now. Why was that missile fired?
Old George Knapp, who was the first person to interview Bob Lazar.
Yeah, people are trying to debunk that video and like be like, oh, that's balloons. I'm like, are you out of your mind? That thing is floating for like 3 or 4 seconds after that without even coming down at all. But the other thing that bugs me about this that I wanted to bring up earlier is that I'm out here talking about, you know, how this technology is working. I'm promoting these engineers that are on these disclosure movies that are friends with George Knapp and those people you see testifying there. And none of these people have ever reached out to me before. Never once ever has a single one of them ever reached out to talk to me. And you would just think, like, this guy's your #1 super fan. He's promoting your work. He's saying that you've got it all figured out. And wouldn't you want to talk to him about these videos that prove all your scientific theories, right? Like, it's not like I decided that that's the theory because I just picked it randomly. Like, that's the theory that makes those videos make sense. And yet they haven't. And when I emailed Hal Puthoff and he responded, he like gave me the shortest, like 1-sentence response and almost acted like he doesn't like even believe in 0-point energy. I'm just sitting here like, I tell people like, this is like Yoda saying that like the force isn't real. Like, you know, it's just, it doesn't make any sense to me. So I get worried that like, why are they avoiding the topic? And well, I think about what are the implications of what we talked about. It means that we have this tech. And that could mean that those people, while they may have good intentions, at the same time, they're protecting national security. They know that we're doing stuff that's morally dubious at best.
Yeah, and I bet if you're being as generous as possible to some of these guys, like they've probably been tricked before. They've probably, you know, been taken out of context. They're probably very careful who they communicate with. I think that's fair to say too. CJ Correnti says, what is your theory on 3I Atlas?
Yeah. My theory, I told people that it's just a rock, guys. And I feel like I got vindicated on this. People were like, yo, Ash, you're going to get proven wrong. I saw Avi Loeb doing his thing where he says 50% chance that it's non-organic origin. I'm like, come on, bro. And this is the reason why. What have we talked about for the last 2 hours here? We talked about wormholes and teleportation and aliens can be invisible and they're going to appear from nowhere, right? Why would an alien be flying on a space rock if they have that level of technology? That's like Flintstones aliens taking their yabba dabba doo car and running around their stone car. It makes no sense whatsoever. So to me, it's almost regressive thinking. If you're somebody who believes in aliens and UFOs, you should never be thinking that aliens are flying around on a slow rock that would take 50,000 years to get here from the nearest star system. That's just way, way, way too slow. It's just never, you're never going to do it, right? So that's my view.
Yeah, and I was just looking to see if, because I remember watching him on Joe Rogan talking about 3I Atlas, and I forget the other comment, a booga wooga or whatever it was, a wahoo wahoo, whatever it was. I don't know. Sound like somebody hawking up phlegm. I was looking to see if he had changed his opinion on 3I Atlas, because there was supposedly a point to where it was going to get around the sun, and he's like, I'll be able to tell at that point, and I can't find anything. If he's
all of a sudden it just went dark, right? They go quiet, and this is what happens. Like, oh, they get disproven. They're just like, oh, we're not going to talk about that again anymore. You even see this with like the Candace Owens stuff. They're like, oh, the Egyptian planes. Oh, we're not going to talk about the Egyptian planes anymore, right? Because it kind of gets disproven. And this is where I had a podcast with Avi Loeb. In fact, I pressed him really hard on the podcast about this technology and all this stuff, where I am charitable to people. And I even if I think somebody's like CIA or whatever, I'm still gonna talk to them anyway, whatever. But you know, some of this I'm like, come on, guys, like it doesn't, let's be a little more realistic about if we believe these aliens are here, how could they really happen? What would it really mean? It's not going to be space rocks, guys.
Yeah, I agree with that. It does seem regressive. Lucas Ray's works. Thank you, buddy. Can you ask the aliens if they're real? If they have a technology that can help me read the wind better during my next match, that would be helpful because I suck at it.
What match are we talking about here? Is this shooting, archery? What do we got?
Shooter.
Okay.
I will tell you, Lucas, I came across something. I'm hoping to get it in my hands very soon. One of the most interesting and innovative optics, I'll say that, but it definitely not only reads wind, distance, ballistic solution, the same level of fidelity, day or night. It was basically made by aliens. So hopefully
we gotta get the quantum sensor thing. There you go.
Sensors, without a doubt. Hopefully I'll have that, and I'll be able to do some extensive testing on that technology, and I'll share that with you.
Story I just heard, by the way, maybe a fun story for him, because that was a big donation there, was that I heard that when we were first trying to shoot probes at the moon, we kept missing. And it turned out when the probe finally hit the moon, it was an accident. And what was the reason for it? All the electronics was accidentally turned off on the machine, on the probe. And so people started to assume, well, maybe it's because these moving devices inside, the moving parts, the moving electromagnetic parts are somehow interacting with the void of empty space to
creating a thrust one way or the other way. Yeah.
And so you could think about this from a shooting perspective. If that's true, then even if it's a small effect, that effect theoretically could apply even for a bullet and cause minute changes in its trajectory. So who knows? Maybe if you're a quantum physicist, you might be the best shooter out there.
Hey, glad you checked out the MH370 case. Did you watch the redacted interview I posted to you of Ashton? I haven't. I'll check it out.
Yeah, that was a great one. That was probably the one that kind of put me on the map. It got millions of views talking about it. But a lot of that too, like you're now talking to me where I've come to some pretty mostly conclusive opinions on where I think that like what the technology is and where it's gone versus back then. The biggest reveal was the Gorgon stare wide area motion imagery. The one video is called satellite video. So we'd just been under the impression it's a satellite video, especially since it said NROL 22 and in the bottom left corner. And it wasn't until much later, because I didn't know about military surveillance. Somebody left a comment in my YouTube chat and they said, anybody who's worked in intelligence knows that's whammy. And I was like, oh, what the hell is whammy? So I Google whammy, wide area motion imagery. Sure enough, I could just tell right away that's what it is, because you read about it and it's like a computer generated thing that's a low frame rate, just like we were seeing there. And long story short, did some research and I found out it's not just whammy, it's something called Gorgon stare wide area motion imagery. And it's a very specific version of that software called Increment 2 that would hit right around 2014. This was the biggest revelation because now we have a positively identified surveillance system and we know the company that made it. In fact, that day that we figured that out, I started calling the company up to get a statement. And then when they started hanging up on me, I made a post about it and we shut down their whole phone system. Their whole phone system completely came down because we kept calling them. Everybody was spamming them for a record. And then they deleted the entire web page from their website about the Gorgon stare wide area motion imagery. It got 404'd in real time. We watched it and now it doesn't exist anymore. So for the people out there that are like, no, that's not real, I'd say that's a pretty weird story that is a real story that happened like 6 months ago. Actually, that was like 9 months ago now. But, yeah.
Given the implications and the ramifications of that video, what do you think? Do you think somebody just randomly decided to leak that? Do you think that was intentional? Like, what do you think's going on there with that? Because you would think something that big, basically what we're saying is that we disappeared freaking like well over 230 or so people. And on top of that, we're revealing some technology that is only theoretical. So why do you think that the government allowed that to get released?
They didn't allow it. No, it had to be unintentional leak. And I think the person that leaked it, Edward Lynn, it was either indirect or he had good intentions. Like somebody reached out to him, like maybe his Taiwanese counterpart, his buddies in Taiwan. This is kind of how they got him and said, hey, can you use your connections to find that missing plane? And then he goes and logs into the system and he sees that and goes, oh shit, and he either thinks it's aliens and is like, hey, I'm going to be famous because I'm about to leak this alien footage, and here's your disclosure, aliens zapped the plane. Or he knew it was us from the context, like I was able to figure out as us, and then realized this is an illegal operation. I mean, you could argue Edward Lynn is a whistleblower revealing an illegal operation. The problem is I'm pretty sure the government's going to have the legality of that whole thing locked up. Like Obama knows about that. You know, Admiral William McRaven knows about that. He was the SOCOM commander at the time. You know, John Brennan, James Clapper, the DNI, the CIA director, they all know. The president knows. I know for sure because the president has to be the one that dictates policy. The CIA can't dictate policy. They can only give options. So, you know, I don't know. It is what it is. A lot of people know about it.
What was the evidence that he was indeed the one that leaked that?
If you read about his case, you'll see that he was in signals intelligence. The thing that he leaked was the highest level, went to the highest level of Joint Chiefs of Staff, but also his lawyer argued during the case that the evidence in question was available on the internet, which is probably the most damning thing of all. Right. The time frame also matches perfectly. The investigation began April 2nd, 2014, 3 weeks after the plane disappeared. The video first gets published May 19th, 2014, but the person that published it said they received it 4 days after the plane disappeared. So in theory, the person that leaked the videos, if we believe the description, that person leaked that video right after it happened. And so if you look through other people that were charged with espionage and, you know, the other charges that would apply here, nobody else even checks one box. Like Edward Lynn checks every single box. The time frame, they even talk about him leaking weapon secrets, which could be exactly what
we're here talking about railguns. So far, I haven't seen anything.
Isn't that similar to what we're looking at?
That actually is talked about. You know, there's nothing talking about that particular video, but there's multiple other things saying that he leaked to Taiwanese.
Exactly, and they tried to make it seem like he was leaking stuff to China, but they ended up having to admit there was no evidence that he leaked anything to China, which is interesting to give them the context because he may have just leaked these, but not been trying to help our adversaries. But it does so much damage to national security that they came down on him super hard. Yeah, because it's essentially the equivalent of leaking like nuclear weapons secrets.
Or
but maybe
technology.
Yeah, and really his family was super connected. Like his sister's a lawyer with Homeland Security. And by the way, get this, she specializes in countering weapons of mass destruction. That's his sister. And she's married to a big national security MSM correspondent named Sean Naylor, who goes on podcasts and talks about what the CIA can do. So I think he got special treatment. Whereas most people, if they do something this serious, like you're never going to see them again. But for him, either it was indirect and like he was doing something he shouldn't have, but like it wasn't malicious. That's the part where I just need to talk to him because I know he leaked these videos, but I want to know like what was going through his mind when he took these out of a skiff and gave them to somebody to post on the internet. There had to be a reason.
Sure. Folks, I just posted, you can look him up, Edward Lynn, Lin. I just posted the link to this particular article if you want to check that out. But yeah, nothing talks about MH370 or footage.
Oh no. They would never say
he's going to jail for, I think he will serve 6 years.
Yeah, he got a 9-year sentence with 3 years for time served. Or actually 3 years because he cooperated with the FBI and the NCIS. And by the way, I FOIA'd his NCIS case and they rejected it in total, which is really suspicious because if he's the guy that leaked those videos, there's going to be fingerprints of him leaking those videos all over the court records and documents. And in fact, part of the evidence was classified and they had to get special clearances just to review the evidence that he leaked. So, I mean, if you look at it, it just all adds up. Like if it's not those videos, what did this guy leak? And take it a step further, look at other people that are charged with espionage. They say exactly what it is they leaked. They'll be like, oh, this person leaked satellite footage. This person leaked whatever. This person took $15,000 for some weapon secrets. For Edward Lynn, they said nothing.
Well, to be fair, at least that article, it did say railgun technology and a couple other things that they listed, but
yeah, that's not, that wasn't in the, yeah, okay. But that was like kind of just word of mouth, not like what was in the documents, but yeah.
Fair enough. Such a hot stream tonight. Keep it up, gentlemen.
I'm gonna have to grow a beard to keep it.
What do you think about Ben Davidson's suspicious observers on YouTube theory on disaster cycle?
Oh, is that the weatherman guy? I think it is,
I
right?
don't know. I never heard of the YouTube channel or this guy's name.
Yeah, Space Weatherman. Yeah, so he's the like polar reversal guy. Which my view on this whole polar reversal thing is like, if there's going to be a cataclysm that we can do nothing about, I'm not going to worry about it. If a meteor is going to hit us and take us all out, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to live my life as it is, right? So and also I would say, guys, like anybody is trying to tell you that, hey, every 6,000 years the poles are going to reverse, and if you don't buy all this stuff and prep up, then you're going to miss out on it, and they're giving you this huge time frame. How can they know that? It's unknowable information. So for me, those are the two angles I take on. I have nothing against them, and it may even be true with the polar reversal thing. But A, there's nothing we can really probably do about it. And number B, there's a pretty high chance you're going to get rugged at the end of the day on that one.
Yeah. I mean, it's like trying to predict the cycle of super volcanoes erupting. Like, we're not good at that stuff. And there may be some sort of, I don't know, thing that we can look at historically and kind of come to some basic conclusions, but I don't know.
But I do think there is merit to like some of that phenomenon. I think there's merit to the idea of like, you know, is the magnetic field around the Earth protecting us in other times where it's weak? Certainly there's some merit to that idea. I even think there's merit to the idea of, let's say, weather manipulation, but not necessarily weather control. I think you could theoretically, like, you could induce like an earthquake, but you're not going to like control an earthquake. I would say you're not going to control a hurricane, but you might be able to make a hurricane slightly stronger or slightly weaker. And this also speaks to what we were talking about before. It was like, there are things that people can do with this technology that are magical, that are conspiratorial, but you don't want to take it to like too far in terms of, you know, what people are really doing. Are they making a hurricane and then wiping out a bunch of cities? They probably don't quite have that level of technology.
Yeah, I do want to. I'm going to show this real quick because I do think this is really interesting.
I'm going to run to the restroom while you're doing that too.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. All right, folks. So here's our polls that we had today, and it's funny how they're almost exactly switched, right? So we do 75% believe that Bob Lazar is legit. 25% don't. But then up here we have UFOs are ET technology or secret government technology. Only 27% think they're ET, and 73% essentially believe that they are secret government tech. So that's I wasn't expecting that. I figured those would be kind of mirror one another. So that's interesting to watch for sure. All right. Any other final questions? Let us know. I'll try to get some of these in here. The live chats. I just saw somebody talking about a HARP, and then yep, there we go. Look up Bill Gates HARP array. I think that what is your thoughts on that? The HARP array.
Yeah, I think the electromagnetic stuff is really interesting. So radar is just an electromagnetic wave. And what I've learned from Tom Bearden is that if we were to take two electromagnetic waves that are going in opposite directions and have exact opposite phase amplitudes that cancel each other out, we would measure that and say there's nothing there. But from this idea of this extra dimension existing, that would say that there is something there. You've stressed the medium. The analogy would be like a rubber band. Do I have my rubber band? Yeah. If I pull the rubber band both ways like this, the rubber band's not moving left or right. It's staying right here because I'm pulling both sides equally. But that doesn't mean there's nothing here. If I pull twice as hard, something's different between between this and this. But from our classic view of physics, we would say there's no difference. Now, if you do this to space-time, you would say the difference is the stress in the space-time. So in theory, If you were to make these zero waves, we call them these scalar waves, and amp that up, that in theory will cause a deformation, cause some real physical effect in space-time. So why is this important relative to this radar question? Is all you have to do with modern technology to create that zero wave from normal radar is basically put a crystal in front of it. That's it. Like a special crystal, and that will basically turn your normal electromagnetic wave into one of these scalar zero waves. And you can shoot this zero beam around anywhere. In fact, if what Tom Bearden has said is true about this, and he was the guy that was blowing the whistle on this in the 80s, you can take that zero beam and intersect it with another zero beam, and this will produce energy at a distance. This is actually the basis for directed energy weapons as we know them, because standard physics says you can't beam energy over a long distance. You lose too much. There's too much inefficiency. Anything beyond like a couple inches or even a meter, because you lose so much efficiency. So how are we beaming energy, you know, miles or whatever we got to do? That would be how you would do it. So that's the idea behind all that.
That's interesting. What's your thought about geoengineering and chemtrails? I've had Dane Wigington on twice, I think. I don't know if you're familiar with his work.
Those people, I mean, they're very compelling in terms of, you know, it's certainly possible. Absolutely is possible that we are, and we do seeding, cloud seeding stuff, but most of the stuff that I think that people's throwing, you know, pictures of stuff in the sky, I don't buy too much into it. And that's the part too, where there's probably a certain element of truth that's very real to it. Yeah. But it's like the difference between, you can make a directed energy weapon, but that doesn't mean the directed energy weapon is constantly like messing with your brain every day and that they're tracking you and doing that. So, you know, can they do it? Yes. But are they? Probably not.
Speaking of which, I didn't even see this. I just brought that up independently, but Jay Aether says, shout out to former head of FBI Ted Gunderson for admitting geoengineering is real, and so are chemtrails. I do think I just don't know what the scale and how effective they are. I do think that chemtrails are real. I do think geoengineering is real. I just don't know at what scale they're using them and what they're actually getting out of them. Like you said, I think Dane Wigington, he's provided some really, and folks, you can go watch that. Just look up geoengineering on my YouTube channel. The title is Unmasking Climate Engineering, the Hidden Truths You Need to Know. And anyways, you can go check that out. But he does have some compelling evidence regarding the amount of aluminum oxide that's being dropped on us before, after, and a bunch of different, he shows a bunch of different patents for the technology. He's shown that they've actually flown next to some of these aircraft that he alleges are actually putting out chemtrails. It's pretty compelling.
Yeah, no doubt. They can definitely do it.
Take it for what it is. Decide for yourself is true and do some more research on it.
Yep.
Let's see. When am I taking Ashton to the range, man? I don't. Where are you located at, Ashton?
I live in St. Paul in Minnesota. It's finally getting warm here. Been a while. Where are you guys at? Oh, you're in what, West Virginia or something like that?
West Virginia. We're about an hour and a half from DC. So. You ever want to come out and do some shooting? You let us know. We'll take it.
You
would probably be an excellent long range shooter. Get you down there, doing some basic freaking calculations. Next thing you know, you're freaking a PRS pro. You would love it.
Sounds great.
I'm shocked. Gary has him on. I didn't think he was open-minded because you don't know anything about me, dude. You haven't been watching this channel for 5 years. I've talked about all this stuff. This is the crazy thing, and this is what we see all the time. Because I disagree with people on Candace Owens and their retarded theories, that I'm not open-minded just because I won't believe all the bullshit out there. No, again, I assess everything individually. And because I disagree with you, I'm paid by the Jews and, you know, everything else. I'm just like, you people are.
And also, you don't have to agree with me to talk to me too, right?
Yeah.
Like, you could still think it's BS and still just want to talk to somebody and hear them out.
No,
That's
like,
the part
I'll tell you, when it comes to the MH370, like I know 98% more about that entire thing than I, now that I did before you came on here. I like to hear everybody's stuff, And yeah, no, I mean, every single take that I've seen of yours, from a scientific basis to politics to Candace Owens, I find based. And you know,
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. Well,
yeah,
I want to also give the impression that I'm not just some random crazy person too, you know, where like, hey, I'm saying the craziest stuff
that ship
out
is
there.
sailed. I already know you're crazy. That's fine. I'm good with it.
Yeah, we already got that covered.
You are, Ashton. No, you clearly know your shit, and I think that. And again, I watched some of your videos. I didn't want to get too down the rabbit hole, so I'd leave my brain with plenty of open room to ask questions. But
Yeah.
you know, you're a serious person that I think approaches this from a science and evidence-based aspect of it all. And I've enjoyed talking to you. And
It would be
look
really
forward to
easy
having
to
you on.
like do a bunch of the grifty shit too, right? And say a whole bunch of fake predictions for people and tell people like, hey, if you give me enough money, we'll be able to, you know, do this and speed this along. And you know, I try to avoid as much of that as possible. At the same time, you know, I do have basic monetizations on my stuff, but I think it's really important for these topics that there be some level of credibility and decorum to the conversation.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you know, that's what I have found compelling about everything I see of yours on social media. Full body teleportation system, a pulse gravitational wave wormhole generator system that teleports a human being through hyperspace from one location to another. U.S. patent US 200600711122A1.
Oh, I know that one. Full body. That's John Quincy, or I think is his what was that one? Full body transportation system. I think that's the one. So there's these patents that are out there. Yeah, John St. Clair is what it is. And my sources told me when I first dug into these patents that was a fake name that somebody was using for those patents, and that there might be an element of truth to them. And there's a weird rabbit hole about those patents as well, about like that the guy, like they've tried to find who the guy really, his name really was, and I can't remember the full story for it. But there's, long story short, there's a lot of patents out there that explain this technology, that use this technology, and it's very real, but they have to be very careful about the wording they use, because they have to avoid you know, the patent office saying that this breaks the laws of thermodynamics or physics or what have you. So this is why you'll see some things mentioned using words that are more like politically correct from the academic perspective. Now, that one isn't necessarily a patent that I would say, hey, that's the best patent that's out there, because it's more of a conceptual patent as opposed to like the hard bolts of what you're building and what you can actually do. But there are a lot of fun patents like that that kind of, you know, expand your mind and your perspective.
Yeah, just because you're given a patent doesn't mean that it is a functional item, right?
Right. Correct.
No, this is a good point. Awesome Eagle. The reason polls mirror each other is because Bob is credible. Government was reverse engineering this tech for nearly 80 years. Obviously, we have some breakthroughs, and Normie's confused with aliens. Yeah, but I would also say the reason I was surprised that those were polar opposites of each other on those polls was the fact that that's what Bob Lazar actually attributes that technology to, is to extraterrestrials. So that's why I was a little surprised by that, but I can see where you're coming from. Makes sense.
Yeah, you know, one thing I'll say on that real quick too is that basically every UFOologist that I spoke to said that we were not successful in reverse engineering this technology. Because that's what I would want to know from them, is like, hey man, I'm looking at these videos where clearly we've got it figured out, but they all say that we haven't. And I think that will be the biggest narrative shift, and it's already starting to happen, that this community, my community, what have you, has gotten ahead of, which is that they're going to start saying, oh no, we have been at least partially successful in figuring it out.
S. Fleischer says, best duo live stream ever. Well, thank you, man. Glad you enjoyed it. Glad you guys enjoyed it.
We do have a pretty good vibe going on right here. I
yeah,
like it.
Man. Gravitology, a new gravitobiology, I would probably say that's how you pronounce that. A new biophysics, great book.
Yeah, a lot of people there's clear connections between, especially the quantum physics and a lot of these ideas about consciousness, microtubules, etc. I generally just avoid that, mostly not because I'm not into it. Oh, actually, that is probably the main reason. I'm more of like the hard physics kind of guy. That's just what I like and what I enjoy, the technology. The biology side of it, some people are more inclined to that. And for the people that are, I think that there's definitely something here related to that. And it may go so far as consciousness itself may be a phenomenon that arises from this extra dimensional energy, that our bodies are just like a transceiver, and we're receiving this signal of our soul, and our soul is actually an external phenomenon, and that our bodies are just tapping into it. Because if that were true, think about the implications. Huge.
You lost me at consciousness, but I agree. The 1918 influenza Spanish flu was supposedly meteorite asteroid organism seeding worldwide. Travel wasn't fast enough for everyone to transfer it to each other in such a short time across Earth.
Oh, now we're going on the rabbit holes here. All right, viruses or aliens that have come from the other dimensions. I'll be honest with you. I've actually, when I've had a couple to drink, I've entertained this in my mind. I thought, how much do we really even know about viruses? Right? The reality is we know less than we think we do. And I mean, unfortunately, we used to believe in like viral shedding and replication, and then COVID came along and we just decided we're going to throw that all away and just go back to superstition again.
Yeah. Bro, DOD literally disclosed the capabilities of radar to manipulate weather. Again, NextRad stations, look it up. I have seen that technology. I've read about it, spent a little time on it, then moved on to other things. What's your thought about this? The ability to use radar to different wavelengths of radar to manipulate weather.
Yeah. Like I said before, I mean, it still holds true. I think manipulating weather and controlling weather are two different things. Absolutely, you can manipulate weather. There's no doubt you can manipulate weather. But then getting a controlled phenomenon, like moving a tornado around, or that's a whole nother
using weather as a weapon.
Yeah, exactly. So
now,
yeah, they probably can. Go ahead.
What are your thoughts on? I just saw your message. I'm glad I saw it.
We can close down.
Yep. What is your thoughts, real quick, on Maui fires and the Palisades fire? Do you feel like that there's any there as far as conspiracy goes?
Again, this is just my opinion, but generally, I don't really think there is. I don't think we use directed energy weapons to do it. Just doesn't. Why? I just can't come up with the motive for why on that front. Could we have? Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think we definitely have directed energy weapons. The Goy beams is what they're calling them now, or whatever. But yeah, I think we do have directed energy weapons. I don't know they're coming from space, but we definitely have directed energy weapons, and we could probably do that and burn down whole cities if we wanted to. I just don't think that we necessarily did. So
fair enough. Well, I would say that the motive would be to reclaim the land for government purposes, which seems like what they're trying to do in Maui, at least. But we will end it there. So first of all, everybody, if you haven't done so already, make sure you like, subscribe. Make sure you go, if you're watching from his people or just found us, make sure you subscribe to our channel and or on our X account. And for my people, definitely go give Ashton a follow. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it as much as we did, but really it's all about me. I enjoyed it, so I don't care. But no, I really appreciate you coming on, Ash. This was a lot of fun. I look forward to doing some more of these in the future, and maybe we'll jump in here.
Yeah, any other time you want me back out there. And I just saw the last super chat roll up, which was that they say we don't know anything about our history. It's like, first of all, we don't know much about physics, and we also know almost nothing about our history. We can barely even go back 10,000 years. And yet look at how advanced we are as biological beings, as just technologically. Doesn't that just seem weird to people? It certainly does to me. That's my part.
Well, and there's all kinds of different estimates, but let's say the humans have been around for 100,000 years. Like, our brains are the exact same. Like, nothing has changed structurally. If you believe in that. And so the idea that we're just now getting into this, and I love what Graham says. He has a saying that Graham Hancock, he says, we are a species with amnesia. And I think that's true. I think there's some things that, we have gotten to levels of technological advancements in the past that, I mean, it just makes sense that there were some sort of, catastrophic events that took place that wiped out a large portion of this. And I think still you can still kind of fit that into the box of biblical as well, whether you're talking about the flood or anything else. So it is fun to I don't know, consider, postulate all those things. Read Durd's piece out. We will leave it at that. Listen, folks, we really appreciate you tuning in. Ashton has to get out of here. Ashton, thank you so much for coming on. You stay put, but for everybody else, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate your support. And until next time, stay armed, stay ready.